What happened yesterday on Gong was unprovoked genocide.
Before viewing this, please go back and watch Stop Genocide Part 1. This is a collaboration between myself and Jason Unruh on the subject of opposing genocide, and a breakdown of everything that's been going on as best as we can provide it for you, and what we should do moving forward with all of it. Some of you know who I am and some of you don't. I am Comrade Net. Particularly, I'm known as a Bundist. And a lot of people don't like that because a newer theory referred to as Demarchism is largely responsible for what got Bundism back into popular consciousness. So I'm gonna make something clear. Demarchism is basically for socialists who don't identify as communist or anarchist. In the same way where Marxism is the dialectic of the communists, Demarchism is the dialectic of the socialists. You see, a Demarchist don't want to create a permanent tendency of socialism known as Demarchism. That's not the point. The point is for equity socialists who are uncomfortable with being called communist or anarchist. Why would this be? Two reasons. Green socialism and the non-alignment movement. A lot of people find the terms communist and anarchist and Marxist to be tied to white people or middle-class movements. Now, I understand a lot of people are going to be raging, with fists about me saying that, and I just hope that the nuance is understood as I'm not saying that that's what a communist really is or what an anarchist really is. And anyone familiar with me already knows this. The problem is equity should come before equality. Let's say that we had revolution right now and you declared that all the classes have been abolished. All caste, class, race has been abolished. Guess what? That's not going to work. You can say anything you want on paper, but as long as there is a cultural hegemony of any sort that stands, that's not the case. Therefore, I am proud to not be a communist, but to be a socialist. I seek equity for the repressed, for the exploited, for the downtrodden. I do not seek an abolition to class. Once reparations would be given to, say, my people, for instance, that does not make me equal to all you white fuckers out there. We're not equals. We never will be. Communism is something that we must aim for, but socialism is what we must do. And that means reparations. The proletariat is whoever is truly exploited. And as far as I can see, that's not the industrial worker. In fact, I don't believe that the industrial worker during the time of Karl Marx was proletariat at all. That's a hot take. Just keep in mind, I'm pretty sure Jason Unruh doesn't agree with that. So just keep that in mind. I'm like, if you're communist and you disagree, fine, disagree. But I do believe that the Russian workers were proletarians. But I think that the failings of both Russia and China was that it should have been peasant-led, not worker-led. Who says that the worker is the eternal force of revolution? What do workers care about? Jobs, wages. I don't see proletarians. Proletarians are people who are exploited. So the lumpen proletarians are actually proletarians. The colonized people are actually proletarians. And the failure of both China and Russia to keep revolution going was the fact that it wasn't peasant-led. By peasant-led, I'm talking majority of the peasants. I'm not talking about freaking disgusting kulaks. I'm talking about the serfs, the majority of the peoples in both of these areas. This failed because of worker just being called the proletariat when the proletariat was clearly the peasants. The proletariat is who's exploited. But because of Marx, people think it's freaking industrial. Insanity. Absolute insanity. Like a fanatical religious devotion that you can't admit that that's what you're doing. Anybody that knows me knows that within the First World, I'm for the lumpen proletariat. I'm not the one who started the notion that black people within the Western countries make up a national proletarian caste. I did not make that up. No one tendency can be credited for that either. This has been an observation that people have noticed for a while. And I hold to it. So If you talk about a first world proletariat, it's not black people, because the first world is more than just European countries. But if we're talking about within Western countries, yeah, black people are the actual proletariat, and that's one of the reasons why you never see revolution. Then the other thing is, as far as a class is concerned, the lumpen proletarians are actually the ones that have the potential for revolution within the first world. This is why the streets are flooded with drugs, because the fact is the system is fully aware of who is more likely to do revolution within their systems, and they do everything they can to halt it. One of the big thing people mistaken is some people think third worldism was invented by Jason, and that's not true. And many people think Denmarkism is invented by me, but that's also not true. The truth is these are different theories which get repressed by online Marxists and online communists who basically are nothing but millennial children who have grown up sad and pathetic, trying to clamp down like, oh, Gen Z is the most conservative. No, Gen Z is the most polarized. Thank God they're so polarized. I am so happy to see that Gen Z is the most polarizing generation we've seen. You have the yuppie, privileged Gen Z, and then you have the lumpen Gen Z, or more like the going lumpenized, largely because autistic people, which are increasing because neurotypicality is breaking down, and that's changing everything, and this is causing a different flux to occur. Now, I'm not saying that, oh, you know, autism makes you proletariat. I'm saying that this itself causes a lumpenization. The first world is not breaking down. The Western countries are breaking down. The first world can reconfigure if the Western countries go down. Keep this in mind. It's also important to understand that China is in no way a socialist country. Now, in defense of Maxwell Glover, Maxwell is looking at cultural elements. I've paid attention to what Maxwell looks at. He's looking at the cultural elements, and he has faith that the proletariat of China will utilize their culture to overcome the corruption of the government, which is taking it down the capitalist path. I'd say it's already way past the capitalist path, but that's a different subject altogether. But China does have a proletariat and a lumpen proletariat. If you want to find who really loves the MLM theory, though, in China, you're going to have to go to the proletariat. Sorry, you're going to have to go to the lumpen proletariat. All of these nuances matter. And if we're going to stop genocide, we have to understand what's been going on. One of the biggest reasons why it was so easy for people to support the counter-revolution in Syria was because many people do know on some level or not that the ongoing persecution to the Christians of the Orient has been a big thing. The confusion arises that there's a West Church and an East Church, and I will cover that on my own in the Bundesmanual report series. But I have given out this disclaimer about what this is mostly about. This sets the tone for the rest of the series. The warm-up was the last video. It was called Stop Genocide Part 1. This is Stop Genocide Part 2. And now that we've done the warm-up, we're now setting the tone. Please go back and if you have not, go back and watch Stop Genocide Part 1.
As we know, Israel has bombed Iran, and these quotes here were taken before the bombings took place, before the U.S. had gotten involved and bombed Iran. Israel said, "This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat." Iran says, "The Zionist regime has committed a crime in our dear country today at dawn with its satanic, blood-stained hands." This is when Israel bombed Iran after claiming that it had violated whatever nuclear agreement it claims that it had, claiming that it had nuclear weapons, that it had not lived up to such and such agreement that was voted on 19-11. So Israel decided to take it into their own hands and bomb Iranian nuclear sites, an event, a action that has now been, the consequences being far worse than they ever imagined. Because now, over 20 rounds of retaliatory attacks have hit Israel, and have caused an untold amount of damage. All this because Israel just wanted to provoke an incident with the hopes that the United States would be the ones to come in and carry it out for them. Turkey strongly condemned Israel's attacks against Iran, which violated international law. And the U.S. said tonight Israel took unilateral action against Iran. We are not involved in the strikes against Iran, and our top priority is protecting American forces in the region. And up until that point, it seemed very much true. The United States was not involved. Israel's actions were their own, and they had unilaterally decided that they were going to attack Iran on their own for a perceived injustice, and then paid the price for that. Turkey, of course, being largely a country that does not support Israel, has not supported them. It largely has cut off all kinds of goodwill since the genocide against Gaza began. And Turkey certainly being absolutely no friend of Israel. But we should not forget that this is a plot to try to get the United States into a conflict between Israel and Iran. Hamas said this aggression constitutes a dangerous escalation that threatens to destabilize the region. Today, Iran is paying the price for its steadfast stance in support of Palestine and its resistance. Saudi Arabia said Saudi Arabia expresses its strong condemnation and denunciation of the blatant Israeli aggressions against the brotherly Islamic Republic of Iran, which undermine its sovereignty and security and constitute a clear violation of international laws and norms. Hamas, of course, standing strong with Iran, a country that has given a lot of support to the Palestinian resistance to Israeli occupation, and one of the few countries that has stood beside them the entire time. There has been a strong supporter of the Palestinian people throughout the genocide that they have suffered since 1948. And Saudi Arabia showing their support to Iran against Israel's unilateral actions, which threaten to destabilize the region and could potentially provoke a third world war, one that was certainly escalated further when the United States got involved and decided to bomb Iran. A terrible, terrible situation that threatens to bring onto a wider conflict. Even other powers in the region were upset. Jordan has not and will not allow any violation of its airspace, affirming that the kingdom will not be a battleground for any conflict. Qatar said it is a dangerous escalation that threatens security and stability of the region and hinders efforts to de-escalate and reach diplomatic solutions. Oman said Oman considers it a dangerous, reckless escalation, representing a flagrant violation of the United Nations Charter and the principles of international law. Even its neighbors, some of who haven't always been there for Iran, some who haven't always been there for the Palestinian people, and who have at times been allies of Israel, stand very firmly against these actions by Israel, which seem aimed at provoking a wider conflict. But the European powers have their own ideas. Russia says the foreign ministry condemns the sharp escalation, warns citizens to refrain from visiting Israel, and recommends all those already in the country to leave if possible. France says it reaffirmed Israel's right to attack to defend itself against any attack. But what attack? Iran didn't attack Israel. Israel attacked Iran. It's almost comical, France's position here, to reaffirm Israel's right to defend against an attack that never took place. And as usual, Germany backing Israel absolutely, without question, without any moral consideration whatsoever. Berlin backs Israel's right to defend its existence and the security of its citizens. Both urges Israel and Iran to avoid any further escalation, which is interesting because the only escalation, the only provocation was coming from Israel itself. This point being completely missed by Germany.
So I would like to say that you're going to see a Syrian Christian speak in this video. Jason's going to present him. And I want everybody to know right now, he is the source on Syria. The United Kingdom government has harassed him. He's been on the Katie Harper show. And there are critiques to be made about Katie Harper, but I will say this, she's honest. She's 100% honest and legitimate. If only she would stop being so sectarian to Bundists. With that said, though, Medhurst is the source on Syria. He is the source on Syria. The most credible people to know what's going on about the entire Western Orient, which people have labeled the Middle East, is definitely the Christians of the Orient. Here's why. One thing you have to understand is that both Christians and Jews had it made in the Caliphate. We both benefited from living under the Caliphate. The Jews and Christians benefited, in fact, for the same reason. Christians are not allowed to take power, and Jewish people are a people of exile. And even when we are not in exile, we'll still be of diaspora. You see, when the tribes return to the Holy Land, there will be a portion of each tribe in the Holy Land, but the majority of each person from each tribe will be in diaspora, except for Joseph, which is Samaria. And that gets into a more complicated subject itself, because the Samaritan religion and the Jewish religion are not the same religion. And that has actually kept these two nations separate, but these nations will be made one again. Anybody that knows anything knows that the leader of the Judeans, or the Jewish nation, was, in fact, Ezra. But when Ezra came back to the Holy Land with the special protection and endorsement of the Persian Empire, he could not recognize the Samaritans. He was not a Zionist, and he was not a Jewish supremacist. He was a Judean supremacist, as a matter of fact, and there's a serious difference. Jewish supremacy is when you try to force people to become Jewish. Judean supremacy is something else. Judean supremacy is basically discrimination on the Samaritans. And while nobody Jewish anymore is a Judean supremacist anymore, traces of Judean supremacy remain within the Jewish theology. But the question is, did Ezra intend on disenfranchising the Samaritans? I would say no. But he might have intended on disenfranchising the Ishmaelites, and that would be wrong regardless. He might have. There's a lot of nuance that you can't neglect. Dr. Weisfeld, unfortunately, does neglect these nuances all the time. For instance, he says he goes after Christianity as an ideology, and that's crap, because it's the Church of the Orient that's legitimate. It's the Western churches that are break off, and all this supremacism and all this extra hate exclusively comes from them. Now, originally, that's the Roman Catholic Church. But the Roman Catholic Church is no longer the power within the Western Church. It's the Protestants and the Mormons that are that, actually. The Roman Catholic Church, for the most part, has been neutralized, and the demographics from within are fractured. And the overwhelming majority of them actually hate the Inquisition and hate the Crusades. Dr. Weisfeld, and I have to explain this because I have a lot of constituents, and I have other demarchists that are frustrated by Dr. Weisfeld's bigotry on this issue. I just need you to understand it's part of his PTSD. Holocaust PTSD is not like normal PTSD. PTSD itself is not normal, but here's some factors. Dr. Weisfeld, you are not against Christianity as an ideology. You are against Christian supremacy as an ideology, which is exclusively Western. I will say that again. You are against Christian supremacy, which is exclusively of the West Church, and it is leaving, it's vacating from the Catholics. It's enhancing itself through the Protestants and the Mormons, which make up the majority of the Christian nationalists. I mean, there are some Catholics that are part of the Christian nationalists, but they're very few and far behind. With that said, the Catholics that I associate with believe in something called the prophecies of St. Malachi. And that means that they believe that the previous pope, Pope Francis, is the last official pope, and that every pope after is going to be a fraud. We're talking about people that want to change the Roman Catholic Church into the Gregorian Catholic Church. They're also in unison with a lot of radical Lutherans and Episcopalians that have decided to completely divest from Anglican authority. But back to the Christians of the Orient. Medhurst is by far the most credible source on Syria. And in the Bundist manual report, this series that I'm doing, which will show up on 3 different channels, The first row of them will show up on the Jason Unruh channel. The second row of them will show up on Red and Pagan Network, and then the third will show up on Fantifa. But with these videos, I will be utilizing Medhirsch because he is the authority on Syria. One thing that I will make clear is I talk to people directly from Syria, and the persecution that they have gone through since the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad has been destructive. The genocide of the Christians of the Orient has actually started with the Armenian genocide. But the signs were already there. See, there are two periods of the caliphate that are corrupt. The first is what they did with India. And yes, a lot of people willingly converted to Islam in India, but it's also true Muslims persecuted unrighteously, unfairly, and tried to colonize the Hindu people, the Hindu nation. Yes, Hindu is a religion as well as a nation. It's the same thing with the Sikhs. It is a religion as well as a nation. This is actually why people don't want to acknowledge the Jewish nation, because it means by default you have to recognize Hindus and Sikhs the same way, and we should. And if you don't, you're undialectical. People are brought together that way. Karl Marx and his Jewish question was in fact anti-Semitism. It was basically saying they have to all pretty much be assimilated, even though the real question is something called the white question. And the white question starts with the Roman Catholic Church, but it starts to transfer. See, whiteness starts with the Roman Catholic Church, and really what this is the survival of the Roman feudal aristocracy, the Roman royals, and the Roman nobles, which took cover under the guise of the cross. And when that was no longer convenient with them, they went through the guise of atheism and agnosticism. And by the way, it's fine if you're an atheist or an agnostic. Let me ask you this. If you're an atheist for atheism, why do you have an ism about your no-godism? Unless you're a bigot. You wouldn't need an ism. Makes no sense. Atheist is a stance. It's not a philosophy. It's not an ideology. It's a stance. Same with agnostic. Agnostic is not a philosophy. It's not a stance. Now, Huxley, or whoever came up with the word, he came up with agnosticism, but almost no agnostic cares about him, and nor should they. Nor should they. If you believe in agnosticism, you're just as much a piece of shit as somebody that believes in atheism. If you're a real atheist, you don't need an ism, and the same thing if you're an agnostic. But anyway, it's very important that I point that out. Syria was the buffer zone. Syria's being taken down was what led to, it completely led to what happened to Iran, where the state of Israel has attacked Iran without provocation because they are emboldened by the fact that Syria is pretty much a proxy. There is mountains and mountains of evidence that Turkey, the United States, and the state of Israel was behind the coup d'etat in Syria. Now, with all that said, I'm going to read something to you from Dr. Weisfeld. And by the way, I denounce Norman Finkelstein because he says we shouldn't even use the word Zionism. We should use the word Christian supremacy, but he's wrong. We should use the word Christian supremacy, not Jewish supremacy, because more particularly, though, we should really be honest and admit that that really what it is Protestant ideology. By Dr. Weisfeld. The Marxist critique fails in an anti-Zionist program in the anti-Zionist critique by claiming the Jewish religion is the definition of the Jewish people. The Jewish people are not considered to be a people nation and is only considered to be a religion in the Christian sense. Having left any religious convictions, the Marxist position assumes that leaving Judaism as such means leaving the Jewish people. And yet world Jewry is self-aware of themselves as being a real people nation, because the national oppression endured during the Holocaust, the illusions of assimilation, especially in Germany before the Holocaust, have left no other choice other than becoming aware of ourselves as an oppressed nation or nationality in particular circumstances. As such, the Marxist position in rejection of Zionism and the Zionist state is based solely on the rejection not of Zionism, but of the Jewish national identity, which Marxism considers to be only Zionism and therefore a false consciousness. To confront the Jewish people with such a position provides a rationale for Zionism in the Jewish context. If Zionism is the only expression of national liberation. All in all, this means the Marxist position on Zionism and on Jewish identity as reactionary in practice and in theory. In theory, Marxism's position on Zionism promotes Zionism, which it does, amongst the Jewish people. It most certainly does, before and after Stalin. By the instance that to adopt a Jewish identity and its national self-determination can only mean the Zionist state. The Marxist position is held by the ex-communist party members of the One State group, who are now linked to the Orthodox Marxist Palestinian figures in the Jewish Anti-Zionist Congress taking place in Vienna during this month of June 2025. So romantic, and by the way, when I say that, I'm being deliberately patronizing. I mean, the most relevant place to have such a Congress would be Nablus, Palestine. The current denial of the Marxist position that there is not only on Jewish people nation, but in addition, Orthodox Marxism propagates the idea that the Jewish people is not an oppressed nation. In fact, that's the truth. Majority of communists do not recognize Jewish plight at all. There are reasons why I will never call myself a communist. Communism is bougie. I mean, communism is not bougie. The idea of communism is whatever, communism, anarchy, messianic age, whatever you want to call that. Every socialist strives for that. But to be a communist is to deny that, is to deny national liberation and the liberation of several other oppressed demographics that aren't even national. When equity matters before equality. The current denial of the Marxist position that there is not only no Jewish people nation, but in addition, Orthodox Marxism propagates the idea that the Jewish people is not an oppressed nation. This is in effect a denial of the Holocaust itself, as if it had not happened, or happened for reasons beyond the consideration of racist anti-Semitism by the German Lutheran political culture, and subsequently by the Nazi dogma. The logical consequence of the Marxist denial of the Jewish national identity is a matter of Holocaust denial, since even Trotsky, Bronstein, acknowledged in 1937, rather late. And he did that insincerely, by the way. One thing you have to understand about Trotsky is he is the greatest definition of right opportunism. For instance, when the first action in that one international where there was the Bolshevik-Menshevik split, in unison, the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks, the first action they did was to expel the Jewish labor Bund. Primarily because they outnumbered the Bolsheviks, if you want the actual truth. And because Lenin had a sense of opportunism. Lenin was practicing left opportunism by denying the Bund, and Trotsky was practicing right opportunism by acknowledging the Bund, because Trotsky never gave a shit about the Bund. Trotsky would claim to be a Menshevik, a Bolshevik, a Bundist, you name it. There's nothing he didn't claim to be. Trotsky was the most insincere out of any of the revolutionaries. I mean, he wasn't a revolutionary, actually. He never really was. He did do some good things, though. And the only reason why people do deny it, yes, is because of anti-Semitism. Like, for instance, there was a mistranslation by something Lenin or one of the other, or the Bolsheviks, I forget what the details, but there was something that was said in a newspaper that was a complete mistranslation of what the Bolsheviks were representing. And unfortunately, Rosa Luxemburg believed the mistranslation until Trotsky intervened and corrected this for her. So it's not to say that Trotsky didn't do things for the Bolsheviks. He most certainly did. But he didn't do it because he gave a shit. Trotsky cared about himself. Trotsky is one of the earliest evident known figures that we can call was basically a narcissist. That's the best way to describe him. In fact, I think he may have even had a dissociative personality of sorts, given the type of flip-flopping he did. Anyway, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to let you see this video by Donna Newman. This is way before, this is before 2019, if I recall.
because I'd been through the Pentagon. Right after 9/11, about 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who had used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
And then Syria.
We had a chance to talk about a wide range of international issues, including the situation in Syria. And I have to say that all of us who've been seeing the terrible pictures coming out of Syria and Homs recently recognize it is absolutely imperative for the international community to rally and send a clear message to President Assad that it is time for a transition, it is time for that regime to move on, and it is time to stop the killing of Syrian citizens by their own government.
Lebanon.
They both had different reasons, the State Department and the White House, for wanting Israel to do it, encouraging them to do it, supporting them. Our Air Force worked very closely with the Israeli Air Force for months before this, not necessarily with a deadline, knowing when it would happen. It was always going to be whenever there was an incident, they would take advantage of an incident. The word I used was fortunate timing. When the Hezbollah grabbed some of the Israeli soldiers in early July, that was then a pretext, I think that's the only word, for a major offensive that had been in the works a long time.
Libya.
Today we can definitively say that the Gaddafi regime has come to an end. The last major regime strongholds have fallen. The new government is consolidating the control over the country, and one of the world's longest-serving dictators is no more.
Somalia.
Well, violence isn't only on the rise in Afghanistan. In fact, it looks like America's shadow wars have now increased by 1. Drone strikes have long been reported in Pakistan and Yemen, but now there's news that a week ago, a U.S. drone aircraft fired on 2 leaders of the Somalian organization Al-Shabaab.
Sudan.
President Obama is sending 100 combat-equipped troops to Central Africa to advise local forces on getting rid of one of the continent's most vicious operatives, Joseph Kony, the head of the Lord's Resistance Army, a group responsible for atrocities across the region. It's the first open deployment of U.S. ground combat power to Africa since the Black Hawk Down incident in Somalia in the 1990s that killed 18 troops. U.S. troops may wind up now in Uganda, South Sudan, the Central African Republic, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's part of a growing military effort to engage in Africa.
Finishing off Iran. I said, "Is it classified?" He said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Well, don't show it to me." And I saw him a year or so ago, and I said, "You remember that?" He said, "Sir, I didn't show you that memo. I didn't show it to you."
I'm sorry, what did you say his name was?
I'm not going to give you his name.
So go through the countries again.
Well, starting with Iraq, then Syria and Lebanon, then Libya, then Somalia and Sudan, and then back to Iran.
All right, and now I'm also going to show you a reel from a new channel called Tour Nation, and that's and if you want to find it, if you want to search for it on YouTube, you go at the Tour Nation. That's at the @ symbol, then the Tour Nation, as one word, and it's gonna feature two. So this is one video that features two videos from within, and then we will return to me.
The Associated Press went and reported that we said the Holocaust was exaggerated, which was a blatant lie. Our statements was, you can hear it on our site, and you can read it. And we spoke at the opening of the session, right after the foreign minister. At the closing of the session, when the president was there, we kept on reiterating that it's clear that millions of Jews were killed. My grandparents were killed in Auschwitz. The rabbi sitting over there was in a bunker in Hungary, sitting past BBC. It was in a bunker. His mother was killed in Hungary, in Budapest. We all lived the Holocaust. And I went there and I said, I'm a representative of the people who died in the Holocaust. And they died because they were Jewish, because they upheld God's teaching. To them, metaphorically speaking, to dig them up, to rebel against God, to oppress other people, that's a second tragedy, a second Holocaust. So use them to do against God's will. He said, therefore we're here to let the world know that doing to the Palestinians, oppressing them, expelling them, all in the name of God, it's false, it's illegitimate, it's a scandal, it's criminal, it's against the teachings of the Torah. And BBC reported it properly, Reuters, all the Arab papers, I have the quotes, I have everything here. And Associated Press mysteriously reported it was all over the Zionist papers. All of a sudden the Zionist papers didn't read anything in BBC, in Reuters, and all the newspapers, the world papers, and what the even what the official statement of the Iranian sites they didn't write, which they had written about us. What they wrote was, we said it was exaggerated, a blatant lie. It took me 2 weeks after I came back to New York to fight with them that they should eventually make a retraction. They kept on saying it's a holiday now in Iran. We can't find our reporter in Iran. It was in Persian. He says it was another source. Eventually they made a full retraction, which we have here. In December 15th, a story about an Iranian-sponsored conference on the Holocaust. The Associated Press erroneously attributed a claim that the number of Jews killed in that was exaggerated. Rabbi Yisrael David Weiss, who attended the conference, denied making such a statement and said the claim does not reflect his position. He opposed the state of Israel. The story should have also cited Iranian news reports, and he writes there are two versions going out. The members under New York City are asked to use the following story. But who used it? Not one Zionist paper. They totally ignored it. Now, if BBC would have written that I said it was exaggerated, or one slight against anything that you could think of our religion, God's will, anything scandalous, they would have read BBC. They would have known about it. But whenever they see anything that's good, for instance, we went with the president for an hour and a half. He gave us of his time. He had elections the next day for his sister, and it was three types of elections. He sat with us, and they put out an official statement from the Iranian, from the news, from the official government statement, and it was in the Iranian papers and other papers, and they reported the president, they called him the chief executive, called the need to solve the problems facing the world, including the Palestinian issue, through dialogue, and necessity for peace, and paying attention to the prophet's instructions. He said the Zionist regime was built on lies. They should hold a free referendum to establish a government based on the will of the Palestinian nation, including Jews, Christians, and Muslims. He further said, while this regime set up a large prison in the occupied territories of Palestine for the Muslim, Jewish, and Christian residents. In other words, he's recognizing that the Jews are not their enemies, the Jews. They're being held under a sort of prison. So that was his position, not to wipe out the Jews falsely attributed to him, because he spoke in person, he said it should disappear, because it's evil, not the concept of killing people. And he kept on stressing how he respects Jews, that's what he was telling us. And then he finished,
well,
he
we
said,
didn't hear any of that in the media here.
This should be world news. And the most important statement he said that the vigilant and just human beings will not blame the Jews for the crimes committed by the fake Zionist regime and its supporters in the occupied territories,
never heard that
including genocide of defenseless and oppressed women and children. Don't blame the Jews. He's supposed to be the hero, according to Zionism, of all the enemies of Jewish people. And he's making a statement to the world, even if there's genocide of innocent people, don't blame the Jewish people.
Is that President?
Nobody reported this.
That's President Ahmadinejad.
President Ahmadinejad.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, and here we are. And this is Here and Now with Steve Struggle and myself, Dr. Abraham Weisfeld in Montreal, Quebec. And
how y'all doing?
Here we go.
All right.
So you have a couple of reports, I understand.
Yeah, I want to just send greetings out to everybody. Glad to be with you again, and hoping that everybody will please like and share and spread our broadcast. Remember that we're involved in active organizing. This isn't just a news report. I just want to say that. Yeah, but our first report actually comes from Haiti. There is a report. I monitor the situation in Haiti for news that I do, and at this point, there's a strike of teachers. Teachers are on strike in Haiti. There's been a lot of money has been stolen by the schools against around the salaries of teachers, and there seems to be a lot of people who don't know about this. So the education system is in a real crisis. Since the assassination of Jovenel Moise in 2021, this is that's been 4 years, there's been real problem with the school systems. So in January of this year, Haitian teachers launched an indefinite general strike demanding payment of overdue salaries, improved working conditions, and better benefits. There was an agreement reached in January, but the government didn't keep its agreement, and the teachers went back on a strike in April. They want to make sure that many of the demands are common labor demands, health insurance, recognition of the contracts, and improvement of the working conditions and the school infrastructure. A lot of schools are closed in Haiti, or they've been moved to what is called inadequate facilities. Therefore, the schools can't really operate. Students are falling behind in their education. And the pass rate, Haiti has national exams. The pass rates has dropped below 30%, which is not good for any country. And parents and students are becoming more anxious, fearing for their futures, and the potential collapse of the academic infrastructure entirely. So schools have been closed for months. There's widespread closures. There's like people in the United States, you might not know this, Ibrahim, but in the United States, after COVID, there's a lot of talk about learning loss because of COVID, learning loss because of COVID, which I never bought, but people say it, okay? That because of COVID, there was learning loss. So this also is being discussed in Haiti, not because of COVID, because the schools are not properly financed, not properly structured. They don't have proper teachers. Teachers are going on strike for money, better conditions. So this is an impoverished country that got its name from its world recognition by being the first country in the Western Hemisphere to overthrow a colonial power, France, and France made Haiti, or somehow made Haiti, pay back money for their quote-unquote losses. So this is one of the this is an example of what paying their money back to France does. And
That's France colonialism.
Right, exactly. And I always want people to know that, when you hear about Haiti, you hear about so-called gangs, this kind of stuff. And people live in Haiti, though. They live a life. Like, they get up in the morning, they go to work, you know what I'm saying? They have kids, the kids go to school. It is a country with an infrastructure, be it crippled, be it suffering from social oppression and international economic domination. And the teachers there are pretty bold to be fighting back. You have the UN. The United States is funding a UN-backed police force of people from Kenya, which shows Kenya's role in promoting neo-colonialism. And they're trying to fight the so-called gangs, which is a complicated picture because everybody who's not for the system, remember this in Latin America especially, is called a gangster. You might be a social activist, you're a gangster or a terrorist. So, anybody, so the people in Kenya, the soldiers in Kenya are fighting Haitians who have got some beef with the government of some type, and now the teachers are fighting back. So I want people to know what's happening in Haiti, and just give them some solidarity. Look them up on Haiti Liberté newspaper. Haiti Liberté newspaper is a good newspaper to look at, and they need your support and solidarity, and they need you to follow the news there. Yeah. Because unless you look it up, you're not going to hear about it.
Yeah, I think that's pronounced Haiti Libertad, TAD.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm. And, here, in the news, the only thing that is ever heard about Haiti is that 60% of the capital city is controlled by what they say are gangs.
Right.
What these gangs are, I presume, is militias of young people who are trying to survive,
That's what they are.
But they only sort of, present it as, being a gang sort of, operation because they're trying to rationalize the intervention of foreign troops into Haiti.
Right. Exactly. And also criminalize anybody who's not in line with the colonial setup, with the governments that set up. They're never elected. And if they were elected, let's say they were elections, in a situation like this, how could there really be free elections, considering that France, the United States, and other countries are the dominant interventionist force when it comes to politics and the economics? But if you're not part of that clique or the classes that support the U.S., France, Brazil, other countries that have intervened in Haiti, then you're a terrorist or a gangster.
Yeah. There's so much news, that, basic, information of various countries that is not getting through. For instance, the opposition within the Zionist state is enormous, but it's not making into the regular news. They don't want to say anything, that threatens, the credibility of the continuation of the Zionist state. So they're not reporting the fact that the Haredi parties, the religious parties, which have been supporting Netanyahu's government in a coalition government in order to get their, subsidies, for their yeshivas, for the madrasas, their religious schools. So now this government that they've been supporting wants to pass a law conscripting, the Orthodox into the military because they don't have enough soldiers, willing to fight. They call up, 30,000 reserves and they get, less than half showing up. Okay, so what are they going to do? Stop the war? No. They want to call up the Orthodox. And, they're calling up 30,000 Orthodox. And how many show up? 2,000. No way. And those 2,000, probably don't have anything else to do. So, the Haredi parties who are in this government coalition, and Netanyahu cannot continue as a government without their support because they are, much more substantial than the right-wing fascist, factions that are in the government of Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, like the Haredis, they just support the government and they don't even ask, for positions in the cabinet, they're really naive. All they care about, is their schools and getting the subsidies, to pay for the students who need to live. So they said, if this law passes, then, well, first of all, they're not going to allow any such law to pass, because they're boycotting the Knesset, they're boycotting the parliament. So in the parliament, about half the seats are empty, and they can't pass any law because they can't get a majority. Okay, because the opposition, is supporting the conscription of the Orthodox as well, but they wouldn't have enough of support to pass the law. So they're not allowing them to pass a law to conscript the Haredi, who are exempt by law from serving in the military because they're not warmongers. They're just religious, and they don't want to do anything else but be religious. Okay, no, that's better than being a genocidal soldier, I would say, even if they're secular. Who cares whether or not they're secular? Who cares? Like so many lefters are sucked in, by this notion that the most progressive thing you can be is secular. Like secular, what does that mean? In France, it means you can't wear a hijab. That means the women can't wear a scarf over their hair because of modesty. And it means that, Jewish people can't wear a kippah in public, hair covering. But Christians, they can wear a little cross. Oh, yes, that's okay. That's what's called secularism. It's bullshit. So, that story is not making it into the news, that there's this opposition from the major supporters of the Netanyahu government. This can bring down the government, but nobody's mentioning this, except for Israeli English press, and I can show you this. Proof coming up. Okay, we're in the share here. On my Facebook page, I've got the story here.
All right.
IDF, the Imperial Death Force of the Zionist state, must issue draft orders to all eligible men by July, the Attorney General says. All right, good luck. If Torah learners are arrested, we won't be able to continue in this coalition, Haredi leaders told Ma'ariv, the newspaper. Means you're going to quit the government. The government's going to be brought down. Means new election. Means everything changes. Because they want to try to conscript, the Orthodox. No way, no how. Now, here is another sort of, thing that's come out. In Canada, about a dozen, former Jewish school students who have become anti-Zionists are speaking out and did an interview with the Maple Paper Journal. 13 former students about the role Jewish students may play in Canadians joining the Israeli military. Because the Jewish schools, so-called Hebrew schools in Canada, that parents pay like $20,000, $24,000 a year for their children to be well educated. Instead, they get brainwashed into becoming Zionists and in fact, volunteering to go and fight in the Zionist military. Completely, like ridiculous. Now, the boycott, the Haredi boycott over the government's delay in advancing a law that will exempt a majority of military-age Haredi men from IDF service. Okay. The government is supposed to be advocating a law that will exempt the Haredi of the Orthodox, from conscription. But it's not going ahead. And so the Haredi are boycotting the parliament, because not getting their exemption. And then the others, they want to pass a law conscripting them anyway and putting them into prison if they don't. Oh, well, it's not happening. If anything, that government's going to be finished. Now, this is a very important comment by Catherine Halper. And she is talking about how Zionism is creating anti-Semitism in the world and how she hates Zionism for that reason. She's got her own podcast. She does interviews with Aaron Maté as well. And she's, a great comrade. Yeah, and she talks about Yiddish too. I wonder if her parents were Bundists. She doesn't mention the Bund. That is, a lot of, like the Jewish opposition, they don't mention the Bund. Ever. Why? I don't know, because they think it's old-fashioned or something like that, some sort of, sectarian reason, or because they were, they're speaking to Marxists, and the Marxists will get upset if they mention the Bund.
I ran across something that really disturbed me that was critical of the Bund. I'm not going to talk about it right now. We'll talk off camera and we'll bring it on. But it was a story.
I'll talk about it. Like at the time that the Bund was debating with the communists, there was this guy Plekhanov from the Social Democrats, reformist, a revisionist, who was abandoned revolutionary struggle. This Plekhanov said that the Bund were Zundis who got seasick. In other words, they didn't want to travel over the sea. And he called Bundists, equivalent to Zionists. And that was an insult. And then there were other insults that came, from the communists, saying the Bundists, were reactionary because they wanted to preserve a national identity that was obsolete, et cetera, et cetera. All this kind of stuff. And who was fighting the fascists? The Bund. Right, while the communists made a deal with the Nazis, a non-aggression pact called the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. And then when the Bundists, had joined the Communist Party and, quit the Bund, they formed a Jewish anti-fascist committee, of course, because they knew it was dangerous, for the USSR. What happened to them? They got purged, put into prison, and then killed. And they were replaced, in the Jewish anti-fascist committee by Jewish communists who were never members of the Bund. And they continued on for a while there, until they too were purged and executed because it didn't go along, with the current sort of policy strategy of the regime. So, that's where it all goes. It's and even now, the Jewish Bund is only mentioned as a nostalgic historical reference for some to try to oppose Zionism, but they never talk about the Bund, coming back. They never talk about, what the Bund's program that was correct and should be continued. No, because they don't want to continue the Bund's program. What was that? That they want to continue that? What is the Bund's program that should continue that they don't want to continue? National cultural autonomy, because they don't want to, treat the Jewish people as a nation anymore. The Jewish people are not a Jewish people anymore, according to them. The Jewish people is just a religion that's obsolete, it should be forgotten about. And there's even, some Jewish academics like Shlomo Sands who cater to this notion of secularism in France. And they write a book, entitled that they resigned from the Jewish people. Okay, good luck. Nobody else is going to believe that. And certainly the fascists don't. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I can't put my hand on it right now, but there was a report from a country. And the reason I'm mentioning this is the use of real not necessarily anti-Semitism, but excuse me, what word I'm looking for? The use of racism against the cultural autonomy movement in some countries.
Yeah.
When I find, I'm going to share with our audience, because it's something we need to talk about. It's kind of a sensitive topic. Basically, that there are minorities, meaning the not majority population in countries, and the cultural autonomy centers are attacked politically because this is where the minorities congregate, or they have a historical and cultural affiliation to a center. It doesn't have to be a church or a mosque. It's a place where, let's say, the Tatars might congregate in a country, or the Kyrgyz, or the Iranians. I'm saying, but they're not in their native country. They have migrated to another country, and they find unity by being around their community people, which is what most people do, especially if you don't know the language and culture of the country where you go to. You'll find peace and solace among, quote unquote, your own people. That's what happens in the world. So I found it very troubling running across a story. Again, I'm not going to go too deep in who wrote the story, but it was basically saying that some corruption was found in the funding of these cultural autonomy centers. And we're happy to get rid of these centers and get rid of these people. And I just want people to know that the Trump's movement against the migrants, they haven't taken that tact yet in as far as attacking organizations, but eventually they might. But in some parts of the world, that's what the bigots and the racists do. They attack the organizations, the social cultural organizations. They attack the centers where people congregate, the libraries, the schools, not because there's anything wrong with the school or the library, the cultural center, but because of racism. And the anti-migrant movement that I see in Europe is racist. There's nothing to do with immigrants taking the jobs. We don't want people here. And they make all kind of arguments, all kind of deceptive maneuvers politically. And I really hate to see it, because on some things I might agree with these people, on like the war in Ukraine, etc. I may agree with them. When they come with this racist stuff, like in AFD in Germany, you see it coming out of Hungary, unfortunately. You see it coming out of many countries, in Estonia. Everybody's got somebody to hate. Yeah. I find it interesting because we've talked, Abraham, that you mentioned the cultural autonomy. I was surprised to see this one article from a very prominent Telegram channel embracing the closing down of a cultural autonomy center in a country, and we have to get rid of them. It's always a cover for racism and bigotry. I want our listeners to be careful when you get involved in struggles. Don't be driven by racism or bigotry or a difference of religious views, because somebody is manipulating those ideas to make some money and to drive a wedge between you and people that can't be united. That's all I'm going to say about it. That's it.
Yeah.
It's terrible. So, and I appreciate you giving me leadership on this. You provide me leadership on this. And that's what got my attention. Oh, wow, cultural autonomy. Let me look at this. And, ooh, they're against this cultural autonomy center because they don't want the people there anyway because they're racists.
Yeah. Yeah, because national cultural autonomy means group of people, not individuals, group. And a group is much more powerful than a string of individuals, for sure.
Right, for sure. Yeah. Definitely. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Appreciate
you're so right. Because look at the United Nations. It's, got 194 states. Okay, but there's 3,000 nations in the world who are not majority in their own state. 3,000 against 194. Okay, so what does the United States do? In countries that are not their allies, they go in and they find a national minority and they offer them support. And they destabilize the regime until the regime, the government fails. And then they move in, and support, the opposition and then buy another election. That's how they operate. Okay.
That's how they operate. Yes. That's how they operate. Exactly.
So what does the left do? The left, when it comes to, an allied country, they will say, oh, well, everybody has to be loyal, to that progressive, government in that country. Okay. And national minorities, forget about, their own national cultural autonomy. They have to support the central government because the central government is progressive, and you don't support a progressive government, you're a reactionary. And if you support, national cultural autonomy and not the central government, then you are reactionary. That's as far as it goes. It's as simple as that. It's not so simple. I'll give you an example. Let's do a comparison between the Jewish Bund, for example, and what the left says about it and said about it in the past, and the Black Panther Party. Okay. Both are national minorities, both organized for self-defense. And if somebody said that the Black Panther Party should not exist because the left is going to come along and support, the black people and defend them against, the white racists. Huh. Are the black people going to accept that? No way, because they haven't come to support them in the past. They
haven't shown them. They haven't shown up since the Civil War.
Yeah, and okay, some volunteers went down, to the South, during the civil rights, campaign. Some communists and some Jewish people went down there and they got killed. Okay, so they supported, the Black nation's liberation struggle.
Right.
But did the unions, the white unions, the working class support?
No.
The Black liberation struggle? No. Okay, so that means Black liberation struggle has to support itself with, solidarity, with solidarists, Okay, fine, but they have to support themselves, defend themselves. That's what the Jewish people did. They supported themselves and defended themselves successfully against the fascists under the Russian Tsar. And in the 1905 revolution, who was fighting back the fascists and the police in the streets? The Jewish Bund. The communists weren't around. The Jewish Bund was 35,000 members. The communists were 8,500. They didn't have the strength. The Jewish Bund did because of collective solidarity, fostered by national cultural autonomy. Okay, so to say that that's reactionary would be utterly stupid. And it's not, said, the leftists don't say that about 1905. No. But when it comes to nowadays, what do they call on Jewish people to do in order to become anti-Zionist? They have to give up being Jewish. Good luck. A lot of Jewish people have tried to give up being Jewish in Germany in particular. They were assimilationists. They said, oh, we're German. We're not Jewish, And along come the 1933 Nuremberg regulations, which said that even if you have one Jewish grandparent, you are Jewish and therefore not German, and therefore you could be excluded and done away with. And they would always say, oh, but we're German, we're assimilated, sure, you're assimilated, but that doesn't mean you get that exemption from the fascists. No way, no how. So the national minority has to defend itself. That's what national cultural autonomy means. And it means, supporting the Black Panther Party, and it means supporting the Jewish Bund. Same thing. Yeah. Okay, those are the important points to be made today. And I think that we're under 1 hour, so we can get it into TikTok as well. We're doing quite well on all the various platforms. We're in the Reddit Jewish Bund group. We're in Reddit Democracy group. We're in on TikTok. We're in Telegram. We're in what's the other one called? Interview. We're of course in Facebook and on YouTube, of course, and all those different platforms give us a total of a couple of 100, listeners. So we've got a core of organizers, political theorists,
Okay.
Who want to know how to proceed. They want to hear the repetition of what they're hearing, on the regular, journalists, like that.
Very true. How do you proceed? What do we do? Right. Good point.
What do we do? What's to be done, basically, as Lenin said.
That's what's to be done. That's a good point. What's to be done? That's very good.
Yeah. And here we are. We know what we're doing. We've got the experience and we're talking about it. And we've got the listeners, who are learning from us. So on we go. And here we go for today. Thanking you very much for your attention, everyone. And we will be speaking to you again in the following week.
So, with all that said, I will now turn this over to Jason Unruh. And let's continue program.
Iran is under attack from the Zionist state and its twin bastard, America. First, Israel attacked Iran. Then Iran retaliated. Then Trump stayed on the fence about what he was going to do. Support the Zionists or put the Zionists in their place. In the end, he did the only thing he could do for Americanism. He is now doubling down on his support for Zionism. Americanism and Zionism cannot be divorced at this time. Worldwide support for Palestine is showing up everywhere, all the time. Iran has to retaliate. It has to defend its honor after this attack. Iran can shut down the Strait of Hormuz, jumping the gas price to $88, maybe $100 a barrel, depending. Shutting it down will anger its neighbors too. Qatar exports 25% of all the liquefied natural gas in the world, and that would be stopped completely. So expect its price to go up. Iranian society is uniquely rallied around the country after the attack. All the religious and all the ethnic groups are in support of resistance to the U.S. Israel has lost the social media war. They have very little support. The vast majority of the U.S. is opposed to starting a war with Iran. Trump is faking sleeper cell threats to scare the public into bowing to his trashing of the Constitution.
So, I'd like to tell you something. If you are not willing to fight Islamophobia, you might as well be a damn Nazi at this point. Because if you know anything about the rhetoric that was used in the Weimar Republic on the eve of the Holocaust, everything you hear about Muslims, the most wild accusations, the most disgusting caricatures of them made, is exactly what was said about Jewish people. This is because of the inability for white culture to face up for the fact that you fuckers invented capitalism and fascism. I will solve the white question right now. You see, the Roman power structure, which became scared, especially after Constantine made Christianity the norm, which led to the further, and yes, Christianity being made the norm actually did lead to the destruction of the empire. Because, there's a lot of things you can say about Constantine that would be critiques and they would be true. But one of the things people miss is that Constantine was often emotionally held hostage by his mother. Thank God. Queen Helena really did a lot of good in the world. And one of the things people don't realize is that Jewish people were fond of her. So whereas Jesus was the foundling of Christianity, Queen Helena is the founder of it, and she happened to be on good dialogue with Jewish people. This is because Yeshu lo Yeshua, and what that means is Jesus is not salvation. You see, the word Yeshua is a name, but it's also a word which means salvation, and this is the word that a lot of people say is the Hebrew name for Jesus, and probably historically it was. But when we say Yeshu lo Yeshua, we're saying we're not calling him Yeshua. We're saying Yeshu because we find Jesus of Nazareth to be an absolute affront. This is something that pisses off both the Christians and the Muslims alike, because the Christians and the Muslims alike universally say that he's the Messiah. If you don't think the Muslims call him the Messiah, then you really have not read the Quran. Unfortunately, a lot of Muslims don't read the Quran either, so they don't seem to realize this. Which is, as much as I respect the Muslims, I'm offended by the Ummah these days on how illiterate it has become, when no group in the world used to be of higher literacy than the Muslims. And now, due to the persecution and the lack of education and greedy people within the community, a lot of that's falling apart. If it had not, Palestine would probably still exist. I mean, Palestine still exists, but it's going to take a lot to save it if we can. Just because it looks like it's not coming back doesn't mean we shouldn't fight. The truth is, we could save Palestine right now, because in the previous video, I said the truth. The state of Israel exists on life support. No excusing, you know, and this is another thing. One of the things I'd like to say about this completely is that permanent revolution, not Trotsky's distortion of permanent revolution, which he plagiarized and flipped on its head, corrupted it to make it into colonial. Because yes, Prospects or whatever the fuck that stupid book is called, I've read it. It's the most colonial piece of shit I've ever read. Like, there are certain things that Trotsky wrote that are good, but like his take on permanent revolution was nothing but unfettered, disgusting white colonialism. He was much like the previous self-hating Jew, Karl Marx. He didn't give a shit about Jewish people. He cared about white power. Yeah, that is a charge I make on Marx. You notice that you can't even read Karl Marx effectively without reading Friedrich Engels, because Marx was just a piece of shit. Yeah, real idea. Calling scientific socialism Marxism hasn't helped you guys. And before anybody fucking jumps down my throat, you do know that I'm actually connected to a lot of communists, right? I'm not an anti-communist. I'm a non-communist. To say you're a communist is a privilege. It's privilege. Because you're looking forward to the end game, whereas we don't care about the end game because we don't see the end game. We see liberation, socialism. You want the end game, absolute equality. Not going to happen. Not going to fucking happen. It's going to take centuries of deprogramming Europeans away from whiteness. At least 2 centuries. So, I want to say a message before I continue with all this. I'd like to say a message to the Ummah, to my Muslim friends. It is true that on a theological basis, as a Jewish Orthodox man, that and while being Orthodox, I'm not saying that I am the best representative of that. I say a lot of cuss words, and I'm way too vengeful for what the rabbis would approve of. But Sunni Islam definitely aligns more with Jewish sensibilities. However, when it comes to cultural preservation, the Sunni Muslims are terrible at this. Also, majority of Sunni Muslims, in my experience, are cowards. The Shia are brave. I mean, the Shia are a little weird in their theology, and from a Jewish point of view of theology, it's a little wonky, odd, but when it comes to civic duties and when it comes to preservation of culture, the Shia Muslims are some of the greatest people in the world, and the Shia Muslims are brave people. They are brave. I mean, those guys are brave. And so, I wish solidarity to all of the Shia Muslims around the world. Long live the Islamic Republic of Iran, which just happens to be the safest place to practice Orthodox Judaism. But unfortunately, and not just you stupid Americans, but most of you white people are not going to believe that. Hell, not even white people. Most of you First Worlders will not believe that in general because you're pieces of shit. Let me tell you something. As I said before, you want to know how to identify who's a Judophobic anti-Semite? Who is a Judophobic anti-Semite? The one who attacks the Talmud. Now, yes, there can be repugnant things in the Talmud, like in any other religious text, but what's not in the Talmud are the things that it's charged with. They say, oh, the Talmud promotes pedophilia. No, it does not. In fact, it does the exact opposite. It does the exact opposite. People will say, oh, well, it condones racism. Does the exact opposite. Oh, well, it's the pretext designs them. No, in fact, if you want to know why the most observant Jewish people can't stand the very idea of a Jewish state and they reject it completely, is because of the Talmud. Something in the Babylonian Talmud, otherwise known as Talmud Bavli, known as Sholosh Shavuot, which translates as 3 oaths, which is actually higher than the 613 mitzvot. Torah nation, or the Jewish people, is not based on any ethnicity or racial identification. It is a cultural, religious group, like the Sikhs or like the Hindus. Because to be a nation, either it's based in culture and ethnicity, or it's based in culture and religiosity. And religiosity needs to be defended, because religiosity is a matter of orientation. Just as being straight, gay, or bisexual, or asexual, these are matters of orientation. So, yeah, religiosity is a matter of orientation. And with paradigm shift, we now know that eventually what's going to happen is where religiosity was subservient to the theologies, that's going to be transposed because of paradigm shift. Theologies will soon be subservient to the religiosities. We will look at our religious texts kind of like the way we look at Star Wars, something we believe in, but we don't literally believe in necessarily, except when it's telling a literal story. And that's because dreams are real. Dreams are real, and reality is unreal. What do I mean by this? Everything is molecules. Everything vibrates. That's what the science shows. Materialism is good if you want to determine things in observation, but it fails on the particle level. It completely fails at that level. Realism is more important than materialism. There should be dialectical realism and the notion of materialist determinism, which is a very real notion. For instance, there has been a determinism on behalf of the empire to destroy the Islamic Republic of Iran. Here, I'm going to dispel some myths. The notion that the women are super oppressed in Iran is a lie. So many of the programs are run by the women, just so you know. It's also not true that they're forcing the hijab. After those protests of the hijab, the mullahs, and it was the mullahs that said, you know, these women have very righteous grievances. And while it was never officially overturned, it was laxed heavily. In fact, you know, despite the fact that people think that they all are one big monolith, the morality police don't like the mullahs. So that might surprise you. The morality police, which I do think are mostly misogynists, and that's one critique I will make about that situation, they actually were like, fuck the sell-out mullahs, they're going feminist on us. Because to them, feminism is a Western plot. Even though feminist women of the Orient tend to wear the hijab for feminist reasons, so that you are not looking at their breasts and you're looking up at their eyes. I've been in Iran 4 times. I was there 4 times. And what I learned about what the women think of the women in the West, they perceive the women in the West as super exploited. It's like, yeah, well, you know, you go there and everywhere you go, there's a billboard of a naked woman. That's a bit exaggerated, but is it really? You'll see the bikini suit woman, you know. It is exploitation. Who's really exploited? Now, it is true that if you're Baha'i faith, or if you're of any sort of LGBTQ+, you don't want to live in Iran. But here's the thing. If you go to the immigration in Saudi Arabia, say, well, I'm queer and I need to leave the country, they'll just kill you right there. If you go to immigration in the Islamic Republic of Iran and say, I'm queer, I need to leave, they will most likely help you get out quickly. Because they just don't want that in the country, and they don't want the scandal of, oh, yes, we're homophobic again. Iran is tactical, Iran is humanitarian, Iran is flawed, very flawed. But it is the only democracy in the entire region. If you actually think that the state of Israel is a democracy, you're an idiot. If you think Turkey is if you think that Turkey is oh my God, there are people that actually have the audacity to think that Turkey is a democracy because it's secular, even though secularism is not democracy. You know what secularism is? And forgive me for pulling out Demarcus. No, don't forgive me for pulling out Demarcus theory. This is why you guys are terrible, you communists. Economy has culture. You know this if you're dialectical, if you've read Lenin, which we've missed because neither Lenin or Mao ever said this. The culture of capitalism is secularism, and the culture of fascism is spirituality. You ever hear that term spiritual, not religious? And you ever hear anybody say, religion is for people afraid to go to hell, spirituality is for people who've already been there? You know what the problem with this idea is? First of all, as a Jew, I don't believe in hell. I believe in reincarnation. There is Gehenna, where people are purged from their evils, and either then they're allowed to reincarnate, or they're absorbed back into the one, the non-duality, or the theity, or divine, this thing people call God, typically. I don't like that word God. I think it's very misleading. Mr. God in the sky doesn't exist, and God is pretty much a metaphor for the very hard to understand infallible truth that is all things. So, I've gotten a little off track here, but I'm wishing full solidarity to the Shia Muslims, full solidarity to the Islamic Republic of Iran, and please understand that if you wanted democracy, you'd want direct democracy, you'd want an interfaith democracy that would make the most irreligious atheists and the most irreligious agnostics feel at home. That won't come with secularism. Now, I'm not against the concept of secular. Civil society tends to have these three things: secular modes, monastic modes, and civil modes. But the civil mode should be over that of both the secular and the monastic. The flaw with Iran is that the monastic mode is what rules the civil society and the secular modes. But in most countries, it's the opposite. The secular mode rules over both the civil mode as well as the monastic mode. If you want a good system, you want the civil system in charge. The civil society is the base, and the state is the superstructure. It's just the truth. Civil society, which includes the library, which includes the fire department, the medical field, this is the civil society. The state includes things like the police and the military. And there is no need for police officers because we could have neighborhood militias. And I want to say this to the best communists, to the real capital C communists, the real solid communists. By that, you have to at least be a Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, or fuck off. Because if you're a classical Marxist, you're a fascist because you believe in the annexation of Mexico, because that's what Marx believed in. And if you're just a Marxist, Leninist, you're going to hold everybody back, and you're probably a YouTube LARPer. And yeah, so I'm talking to the real communists when I say this. Why do you indulge in these stupid communist parties that will never win any elections when what you need is communist militias? And if you wanted to affect people in the party, you could either go through the... First of all, fuck the Democratic Socialists of America if you're in the USA. But if you wish to go within them to agitate, that might not be such a bad idea. But a better idea would be do this within the Green Party. Get the Green Party to become pro-gun. Agitate as much as you can. Solidarity to the Falcon General. So, I'm now going to bring you to from Dr. Weisfeld's podcast that he typically does with Steve Struggle from the original Black Panther Party. I'm going to bring you to this Here and Now episode, which came out before the State of Israel struck Iran without provocation. This Here and Now came out on May 21st, 2025.
Yeah.
Here now, here we are. Wow, took a lot of technical difficulties to get to this point here now, but we're live. Okay.
Very good.
Great. Okay. We can overcome everything. We can overcome anything. Okay. There. Now, what have we got here now?
Real mess.
Yeah.
I want to just tell everybody I had a chance to meet with members of the Palestinian youth movement recently, and they had a Nakba celebration, or not celebration, commemoration, memorial.
Yeah.
And one of the main things I came out of that with is the Nakba continues. It continues. That was my main takeaway as a non-Palestinian. And I was very humbled to be invited. I was very respectful of the space. They had elders as well as children of elders who were in Palestine at the time of when the Nakba began. There's a lot of talk about the current situation as being a continuation of Nakba. And I thought that the news the newspaper that the Palestinian Youth Movement put out, the only criticism I have, and I'm not being critical, is that I don't know how to if there's no address or phone number or email or link or nothing on how to get copies of it. It's an excellent paper. I mean, they mock the New York Times on their front cover. If I can find some way here, why don't I protect my security, but show you all the front cover here. Show you all the front cover. Here we go. Turn the camera on for a second.
You can share that.
Yeah, I'm just gonna turn on my camera.
While you're searching for that, I'd like to say that. Oh yes, the promise to return.
Yeah,
it's a mock New York Times cover.
Right.
I like that technique. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very, very big page.
Yeah.
And on the back, you have.
Oh, wow. Nice job. Nice job. Yeah.
Excellent job.
Yeah.
There's no way to get a hold of it. So I'm going to search out the Palestinian Youth Movement context in the region and see if I can find out if it's available online somewhere.
But you could always, just take a photo of that and put it into your articles that you would upload to academia.edu. You've got a new academia.edu account there in which your writings are going to be made available to everyone, I understand.
Yes, I do.
Very good.
I'm setting it up now. So thank you for that suggestion. And if anybody, it mentions that there's going to be a conference, a People's Solidarity, a People's Conference for Palestine in Detroit in August 29. People's Conference for Palestine.org. People's Conference for Palestine.org is the name, is the website, and maybe there are more links there for this paper. But it's a very good paper. Our articles on breaking the iron wall, kids grew up afraid of the sky, turn the table into a mountain, the revolutionary lives of Abu Jilder, the Guevara of Gaza, and Al-Araj. It was a lot. They had some books on the table about Palestinian life. It was really humble to be able to be there. And when celebrations when memorials are held or commemorations are held like that, we should attend and learn.
Yes. But, I would add something to that, one can sort of, point out, the Nakba is something that has been continually inflicted upon the Palestinian people, and it just gets more intense rather than less intense. But at the same time, one can talk about the Intifada. That first one was in 1987, on the 20th anniversary of the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza following from the 1967 war that was inflicted by the Zionist state. Okay. So the first Intifada of 1987 lasted for about 5 years until, all the militants, about 1,000 militants were killed off, and so the Intifada subsided. Next generation comes along in 2000, and the Intifada starts again. But this time, that Intifada never stopped. The insurrection against the Zionist occupation of Palestine has been an ongoing, continual struggle, militant struggle since 2000. The Intifada has not, ceased. And that, I think, is very important. That shows that if the Intifada is continuing and increasing intensity, especially with Hamas, battle, assault on October the 7th, which was a successful military attack against the military of the Zionist state, and got rid of the whole Golani brigade there, 532 soldiers, the ones who were sniping, civilian protesters during the Great March of Return in 2018, I think it was. Those soldiers were gone. That was a successful military operation, and I affirm it here in public. It was not, a genocidal assault, as the Zionists claim it was, as an excuse to inflict genocidal assault on the Palestinians. No, that didn't happen. And the Palestinians are not, into genocidal, massacre of the Israelis. No, that's not the way it's going. That's just, propaganda. So to point out that the Intifada has not given up, is continuing through various generations at the same time, including various generations, I think is an important point to make, alongside of the fact that the Nakba has been continual since 1948. Because if we say just, the Nakba has been continuing since 1948, it's sort of, can be demoralizing for some people. But to point out that the resistance is ongoing as well, and that now, the Palestinians are getting the overwhelming sympathy of the peoples of the world. And plus, 70% of the Jewish Israeli public are now against the war in Gaza as well. And the Hasidim, who have been threatened with conscription, if they try to get away with that, Hasidim, the parties like Shas are going to quit the government. They'll lose their majority, and the government of Netanyahu will fall, and there will be a new election, and then he's gone. And then the whole Megillah is, open for discussion as to what's going to happen. So, that's what I'm sort of looking forward to. And the opposition is, not only amongst the Israeli Jewish public, but inside the military. When they called up, 30,000 reservists, more than half refused to show up. Mm-hmm. When the Orthodox were called up, for conscription into the military, out of, I think, 30,000 that were called up, 2,000 showed up. So, they don't have the soldiers. They don't have, the means to continue, this assault on Gaza. And the ones that they do send in there, who are, infected with a Nazi mentality, are going to be, disposed of. And they won't be able to get away with that for too long, because how many people want to be, sacrificed for Rien, for nothing, for a conflict in which they're losing. And the Palestinian resistance in Gaza has not given up. They're continuing. They even fire off some rockets from time to time. So, this government of Israel is destroying their own state. They've destroyed the credibility of their state, internationally. And amongst the Jewish people, they've destroyed their credibility as well. So if 70%, are opposed to the war in Gaza right now amongst the Jewish Israelis, it must be at least 50%, that are opposed to the war in Gaza, the genocide in Gaza, and amongst the Jewish people elsewhere as well.
Well said, well said. And I appreciate, I did not really properly reflect the spirit in these articles, because the spirit is one of the resistance is also continuing. I think I should clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah. Historically, we can point out to a certain trend, which is not in favor of the Zionist project at all, and not in favor of the Zionist state at all. Okay, check this out. The Zionist state has been forced to retreat a few times. First, forced to retreat from the Sinai, and from Lebanon, they were forced to retreat. And in 2001, they were forced to retreat from Gaza under the Prime Minister Sharon, the General Sharon. He decided that it wasn't worth it, to keep 5,000 colonists there. They had to use, 5,000 soldiers, to protect them. So it wasn't efficient, in terms of military logic. And so he pulled out. Now they try to go back, but they can't make it. They're trying to occupy Gaza permanently. Then they'll be permanently, torn apart. So, how long can they tolerate that? Not very long. The Israeli public has already turned against the government on that measure. So, they're going to have to retreat from Gaza as well. So, the Zionist state project has been going through a number of retreats, withdrawal from territory that had been acquired previously. But people don't point this out. They only point out to the power of the Zionist state, the military prowess, all its, Iron Dome defense system, which doesn't work anymore, against the Ansara Allah missiles. And in terms of credibility, they've lost, the popular support of the world. So, the Zionist state is in retreat, but this is not sort of, like conscious, this is, like, it's not supposed to be said, because we're supposed to point out, how miserable, the Palestinians are being treated. Well, I want to point out how great the Palestinians are resisting and how the resistance has caused, the Zionist state to retreat on numerous occasions and will continue to do so. They're going to be forced out of Lebanon. They're going to be forced out of Syria in one way or another, either by Turkey or by the Syrian military once they get stronger, or, because of diplomatic, pressure from the Arab Gulf states, which is being, exercised right now. And then the United States, is being forced to concede, make concessions to the Arab Gulf states, because they want their business. Like $1 trillion in business is worth anything to Trump and the United States economy, more than, their support for the Zionist state. Because they're getting hassled. They can't cope. The resistance is too strong. So I think that those are the points that should be picked up and pointed out, by the Palestinian resistance, and not just the misery that the Palestinians are being subjected to. Because that's to be expected, like even, this prolonged war in Gaza, even though their previous, military campaigns in Gaza have only been like 2 weeks before the United States tell them to get lost. Well, okay, so that's changed, that's worse. Yes. But the resistance is also, stronger. So, and the reason why, the military suppression of the Gazans is taking place is because the resistance is so strong. And the Zionist state is afraid of the resistance. And so they have to go in there, to suppress it. And they've not been able to do so. So I don't see, the pessimism involved in, in sort of a proclamation, which says, Nakba, began in 48 and continued until now, and it's getting worse and worse. That's sort of a self-defeating, mentality that I would like to modify, not object to or reject. It's true, but we must talk about, the Palestinian resistance increasing as well as the repression. Which will break first? Well, I don't think the Palestinians are going to break.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing. I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, it's very important.
Yeah. But some things are, just so terrible. The way that they just, drop these 2,000-pound bombs on encampments that are made out of tents. I saw one video, just before, in which, a kitchen, with the wood fire, making some pita bread there was bombed, and everybody was killed. And the bodies are laying all around, and everything like that. That's happening for sure. But they won't be able to get away with that, for very much longer.
Well, I'm hoping that they won't be able to get away with it for much longer myself. Some of the people who have been detained in the detention centers who are intellectuals have been released by court order. Very little in the news about it besides the release. There's something going on. There's something going on there. It seems as though the people who have been detained either are not interested in public statements or are being shunned by their lawyers or are being banned from the press. Because
there's a technique, there's a technique, that the Zionist state uses, on releasing prisoners. They oblige them to promise that they're not going to speak out publicly about their imprisonment. And if they don't keep quiet, then they're going to be rearrested and put back into prison. They're threatened with that. And so a lot of them, just comply.
That may be because there was a particular Turkish scholar from Tufts University, and the judge demanded that she be released, and we heard nothing from her. It just sounds like why?
Because you're talking about the United States. In the United States, the release of prisoners. Yeah, so
yeah, the United States, but something similar may have been demanded or threatened. Because I'm going to look into it a little more. Because this person was released. But here's something that people haven't. I'm going to tell you how I ran across this. I was doing some research on this particular story about a month ago, and the search engine I used, which is based in China, gave me a hint that the Turkish government could be involved in collaborating with the United States to seek these people's arrest and detention and harassment, which I hadn't thought about. And then the search engine encouraged me to do a Freedom of Information Act request to find out how much the United States is collaborating with the Turkish government. Now, I didn't do that, but the point is that many of these scholars are from Turkey that were arrested by the United States, that were detained in these immigration detention-based arrests. They were detaining them because the government said they were a danger to the country, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah. Only one of them has been upheld. Almost the majority have been denied by judges. But it's a possibility that Turkey is involved in this. It's just something that, because many of them have been Turks. And Turkey does use the United States to spy on people inside the United States. They don't, even though they have their own spies here, I'm sure, that's a dubious tactic to be involved in. And sometimes it's better to have the host country spy for you. That's all. So there is a possibility that some of these arrests or detentions were encouraged and fueled by Turkey's desire to harass these people, which is something no one's talked about. Just saying, I think we should keep that in mind. That's all.
There's been a number of judicial victories, overturning the deportation orders of a number of people. Yes, it's very interesting.
Many. I would even argue that, based on just circumstantial evidence, that Trump has not been successful in these mass deportations.
Yeah.
I don't think he has.
No.
We're not seeing like thousands of people rounded up, but he's trying to get people sent to South Sudan. He's doing what the British have arranged or are arranging with Rwanda, to send the detained immigrants to a prison in another country. When they're going to have a trial, who knows? It doesn't seem like there's even any hearings that are planned. It just seems like the goal is to deport them to another country, pay that country money for the imprisonment, and let them rot there. Which, is kind of a, excuse my language, shitty deal. I'm letting people. I'm pretty sure you're saying that there haven't been many victories, and I mean there haven't been many successful mass deportations, but they are trying to deport and detain people, as they have done in El Salvador. They pick some Salvadorans in the United States and just send them to El Salvador. I mean, some Venezuelans, and just send them to El Salvador. And what is their status? Once they're out of sight or out of mind. And at this point, what I see, and I don't see everything, the immigration rights movement hasn't been able to negotiate this development too well. Like, how do we fight back? What do we say? How do we keep this story alive? Unless you're interested in pursuing the story, you don't hear anything about it. It's a new tactic that the United States has embarked upon. They had it in Guantanamo for the people from the war in Afghanistan, but that's a different setup. These are people that are in the United States that they're just deporting to a country thousands of miles away, and seemingly are prepared to pay the money to detain them. Which seems, there's something god awful about this. But Reason I'm going a little bit at length on this is because I had a debate with a friend recently who was saying that they thought that the Trump program was that England that Europe was behind and the Trump program was leading. And I argued that no, Europe has been detaining people sending to the islands in Greece, with the British sending people to Rwanda. They've been ahead of the game. I think Trump is mirroring them. I think this whole the racist populist movement against immigrants, has it to me its center in Europe and Eurasia. Actually, that's my opinion. I could be wrong. And there is some in Africa also, even though it's just like hostility to migrants from Zimbabwe going to South Africa or from Congo, people migrating to larger economies. But this thing about the imprisonment is something new for the United States, and I hope that people who are listeners and viewers will take heed and pay attention to this, because that's what they're trying to do now, is quietly mass deport particular immigrants of either from a certain country or maybe from a certain so-called gang or group that they can target them as the example and send them to another country to be imprisoned, which is it's kind of bizarre because that costs you money. I mean, you could just deport them, right? You could just deport them. Send them. You can put them on an airplane and say goodbye, which is what they've done. And I want to say Colombia has that relationship, but they're not allowed. There's something about they can't be hanged. Colombia is saying they're not prisoners, so we don't want them handcuffed, and they can't be videotaped. They have something's going on with Colombia and the United States with that aspect of how their nationals are returned, the conditions on which they are returned. Anyway, I just want to mention that to you. I'm sorry.
It seems that there's a difference in the treatment of the political prisoners as opposed to the economic migrants.
Yes.
The economic migrants aren't getting, much technical support, and they get deported very easily. But the political prisoners, they've been getting sufficient support so that the first one, Mohammed Khalil,
right,
his deportation was stopped right away by a judge in New York City by the name of Judge Furman, a Jewish judge, as I mentioned before. Although nobody has bothered to mention, that it was a Jewish judge that saved this guy, indicating that, the charges of anti-Semitism, are false charges.
Right.
So, that should be emphasized, but it wasn't. But in any case, he's not been deported, but he's still being detained somewhere. I think he's being detained in an unknown location, and his wife cannot contact him, even though she's pregnant herself. So that's unfortunate, but he has not been deported. And so the prospects of him being deported, are diminishing with time. And he could be a representative of a big victory against the deportation of political prisoners like him. So I'm.
I haven't thought about that, Abraham, but I think you're making an excellent point. Yeah, he is. I think there was a hearing about his being barred from seeing his wife who's pregnant. There was a hearing about it in the news a couple of days ago. The way that the news covered it, they covered it as if there's this crazy lawyer, who was in the courtroom, some kind of, they acted as if the lawyer was nuts. That's the way that the news media portrayed, and they didn't really go into what you talked about.
Well, if the lawyer won, he couldn't be nuts, that's all.
Yeah, it was the way that it was portrayed in the news, that it was the story behind the lawyer's court presence wasn't. They mentioned a pregnant woman, and they mentioned a pregnant woman and husband, but the news did not go into why this hearing was even being held. So this is what they're doing. They're focusing on the sensation and keeping that particular case hush hush. So like I said, there's something going on with his hush-hushness.
Yeah.
I can't really figure it out yet. Something's going on with this. I'm telling you right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. On this computer, I only have 2 minutes of time left.
Okay.
I don't know why.
Okay.
I guess
Okay.
this computer is not registered, with the account in Zoom that it should be registered with. So, but in any case, we've managed to make the broadcast for today.
Yes.
And
Excellent.
you should be able to have a copy of this recording as well on your computer. And then this video you could upload to your page in academia.edu as well, because the academia.edu accepts videos and documents, both.
Well, let's talk more about that off camera, and I'll work on it right away.
Okay, and then we'll make an announcement of your academia.edu site in the comments of this video for YouTube.
Sounds good.
Very good. Okay, great. I'm glad that we were able to go through with the recording today, even despite our technical difficulties. We will persevere.
I appreciate us doing the scientific experiment and figuring out what was wrong and persevering. Yes, excellent.
Very good. Okay, we will persevere because the revolution is inevitable. That's all there is to it,
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Thank you.
Okay. Thanking everyone for their attention, and please share the document in video format here with other organizers and activists who would, I think, appreciate being informed of our discussions. Thanking you very much again.
Thank you.
Until next week, this is Here and Now with Steve Struggle and myself, Dr. Abraham Weisfeld of the Jewish Socialist Bund.
All right, that was something. And this next one came out after the State of Israel attacked the Islamic Republic of Iran without provocation. This came out on June 21st, 2025.
Here and Now. And here we are with Steve Struggle in the Imperial Center, and myself, Dr. Abraham Weisfeld, here in Montreal, Quebec, which is still part of Canada, but is also Quebec. And I have my own painting here on the back, with the slogan, "One Holocaust does not justify another." This I'm going to use this afternoon, going down to a demonstration, getting out, finally, to the demonstration at the U.S. consulate against U.S. support for genocide in Gaza, against U.S. joining in the Zionist state's war against Iran. It would seem that this colonial project that calls itself a Jewish state, which is actually a Zionist state, is let loose. It's sort of, the mad dog of the Western Orient, so-called Middle East, the mad dog of the USA that is on a leash, but the leash is pretty loose, and they're going wild in Gaza, not getting too far, but they're doing some damage to Iran, and it seems they're moving towards, they're so sort of filled with a sense of success there that they're talking about regime change now as well against an Islamic state. And the Zionist state, considers itself in practice not to be Jewish, but to be what they call Judeo-Christian, which sounds like a bunch of gang of mercenaries working on behalf of a Western crusade in the Orient. There were a number of crusades in the Orient, weren't there? It started by France, then Germany, then England. And then the Balfour Declaration, again, is another such project that the U.S. has jumped into, just like it jumped into the war in Vietnam after the French gave up. U.S. is always there to back up imperialism. And so now they got themselves into a second crusade against Iran because Iran was challenging Western domination in the Orient there. So Trump gives himself 2 weeks to make his mind up as to whether or not he's going to take on Iran with the B-52 bombers. But even those, are probably not going to be able to take down the infrastructure, the nuclear infrastructure of Iran, which is no way near, even developing a nuclear bomb, despite the hysteria propagated by the Zionist Hasbara propaganda there. I mean, even if, Iran has enriched uranium to the degree of 60%, in order to make a bomb, you need a concentration of uranium-235 of 93%. And the difference between 60% and 93% is immense, especially because it's the most difficult part of doing such a process. And besides, Iran hasn't even tried to do so and hasn't developed any of the other sort of technology needed to put a nuclear bomb together. So, it's a false narrative, that is being used by the Zionist state to justify its attack upon Iran, and the real reason is because Iran is backing up Gaza. And it's Gaza that's the target and the objective, the occupation of Gaza. And of course, the gas fields offshore, which are worth $500 billion. It's a good motivation for Netanyahu and the businessman Trump. By the way, did you know that Trump's original name isn't Trump? Trump's original German name is with a D in front and an F. De Trump. De Trump is his real name. Mr. De Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to comment on the Iran situation.
Yeah.
I would argue that the reason why the press is focused on Iran's supposedly being injured, that Israel has been injured for the first time since the '67 war. No one has sent missiles into Israel and effectively detonated the missiles. Nobody.
Yeah.
Israel is running out of missiles.
Yeah.
They want to shift the narrative to Iran when in fact it's Israel that's kind of in trouble. I don't know who thought this wild idea out that if I'm negotiating with Abraham and the next day I send my gang over there to burn his house down, that I still should be open to negotiating with Abraham should will negotiate with me. Because that's really what happened. Iran was talking to the United States about the nuclear program, which in my view is none of the United States business. Why? The United States is the only country in the world to ever use nuclear weapons, and their ally Israel has nuclear weapons. This is like the white elephant in the room. So when people start talking about what's happened to Iran, I think they should take a step back for a second and talk about the fact that Israel's dome has been shown to be ineffective, that Iran's missiles are getting through, and that the international community is against Israel. There's no, you find very few foreign ministries, I found none, they're saying we support Israel's attack on Iran, killing members of its military, killing members of its government. Who's saying that? Besides,
Oh, there's an interruption in your audio.
foreign ministry I've looked at, and I looked at a few. I've searched. Either we want negotiations, but then they talk about discuss the Iranian nuclear program. That has to stop. Why? Because Israel has nuclear weapons against the IPT, or whatever the NPT. They're not even members of the NPT. Everybody knows it's kind of like going to a job, and the boss is having sex with the secretary. And everybody knows the boss is having sex with the secretary, but they can't say anything. Why? They'll get fired. So I really think that I hope listeners to this show will consider what's really going on here. Israel attacked Iran with the support and assistance of the United States. They picked a fight, and now they have a bloody nose. They got to say, well, look at what Iran's doing. Look at how all the missiles we sent to Iran. No, you picked a fight. You started to fight Israel, and now instead of being the bully, the guy who you attacked on the playground now has a brick. He's throwing that brick inside your face, and now the guy's broken your nose. Don't say he broke my nose. No, you shouldn't have started the fight. I think what they need to do is the immediate ceasefire and get off Iran's back about the nuclear program and going to get on Israel about its nuclear program. If we could turn that narrative around, then the world would be a better place. But that's a hard thing to do. Because Israel has a nuclear program. Nobody monitors it. Nobody says nothing about it. Why? Because it's an ally of the United States. Why can't Iran have a nuclear program? What's wrong with that? They've even said you can inspect my stuff. They don't have to let you in. You can inspect my stuff. I remember the IAEA, and they're bombing nuclear facilities. You don't bomb a nuclear facility unless you want a nuclear holocaust. Yeah. That's what they must want, radiation in the air to impact Iranians for centuries. That must be what they want. That's a pretty sick way of fighting. Yeah. But they're allies with the United States, and the apple don't fall too far from the tree. The United States is a tree, and Israel is the apple. Okay, so anyway, that's all I want to talk about. Real quick. Let's talk about how this impacts the United States. All around LA, you got military tank. You have an armored personnel carrier going down the street in a mostly Latin neighborhood. Now I'm going to tell you what's really going on. Here's your godless situation. The armored personnel carrier has 3 or 4 trucks behind it with brown skin and white men going after other brown men. Okay, this is what's going on. The reason I hate Iran because it's not considered a white country. It's considered an Arab country, a Muslim country. The reason they hate the immigrants is because they're not considered white enough. They go to the parking lots. They were going to go in Dodger Stadium a few days ago. They were going to go into a professional baseball game and harass Mexicans. And people stopped them from coming in. They were stopped by people.
Baseball sacred.
Yes. No, they were lined up. ICE was going to raid the baseball game. Why? Because Latinos go watch baseball when the Dodgers play. This is nothing but racism. With Iran, it's nothing but racism. What else did Trump do? We had a black holiday a couple of days ago called Juneteenth to celebrate the ending of slavery. Trump now said, we have too many holidays. It costs too much money. Americans don't want any more holidays. So we see Trump attacking a black holiday. We see Trump attacking brown people in the neighborhoods because they're brown. And we see Trump tell Israel to go in and bomb nuclear power plants. That's the 3 faces of the U.S. right now.
Yeah, but
Israel has no
military parade is okay.
I'm sorry people from Israel got hit by a bomb. I'm sorry you got hit by a bomb. But guess what? You've been bombing Iran. You've been bombing Gaza for almost 2 years now. 70,000 people dead.
More than 2
years.
Yeah.
You can't just do this. You can't just be the bully and expect the mind to break your nose sometime, or have a baseball behind their back and knock upside the head when you turn their head. People are gonna do this to you. Everything they got. I'm sorry they had it coming. I'm sorry to say this. They know they're not invincible anymore. You are not invincible. So you have to turn to slander and lies and narrative, put the blame on Iran. No, you attacked the country. They can fire back. It's their right. Sorry. I have no regret, no remorse. I'm sorry people getting killed. I really am on both sides. I really am. Because it's unnecessary. But Iran cannot do anything it wants. It wants its own kind of government. And as long as the United States and Israel want to mess with them, then Iran's going to have this kind of defense. They have to have weapons.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
Even if the Zionist state has the 4-layered, missile defense system in operation and is generally successful, nonetheless, 10% of the missiles are getting through. And it's just a matter of time then, like it's a game of time. And then 10%, keeps on getting through every day. And they cannot even take, like one sort of explosion, sets off, like hysteria that they're losing the war, and they are, because war is a psychological affair.
Right.
Now, so far, Netanyahu has garnered, a bunch of support again, for the war against Iran, because Iran is the big boogeyman as far as, their propaganda has been concerned for the last 4 decades of announcing the threat of Iranian nuclear weapons, coming to exterminate all the Jewish Israelis, as if Iran was planning a Holocaust, a Nazi Holocaust against the Jewish people. All this is still believed, by the Israelis. Now, the task then presents itself, how to convince them otherwise and to bring them to a sense of reality so that this government of Netanyahu will fall. The attempt to bring down the government failed last week when the Shas party voted in favor of the continuation of the government coalition because they got concessions on the conscription of the Orthodox into the military and the maintenance of the scholarly subsidies that the yeshivas receive, for maintaining the studies of the young yeshiva buchers, as they're called in Yiddish. So, how to deal with this? Because the state of the Israeli Jewish population is, a fundamental concern here. Because if the Zionists maintain hegemony over the Jewish Israeli population, they're going to be able to continue the war. What else can stop the war on Gaza and on Iran now? The military force, Iran's, dissuasive military force, is working, but not fast enough, because the Zionists are willing to continue the war, even under the circumstances that they're presented with, with a 10%, missile contact. They're willing to go through with that because the Israeli population is turning a fear against Iran and not against the government of the Zionist state in anger for what they are being led into. So, Netanyahu couldn't care less, if the missiles make contact, as long as the missile, threat, is considered by the public to be the fault of Iran and not the fault of Netanyahu. No reason for him to quit the war, under such circumstances, because he has his base of support. And of course, unending, endless, limitless supply of arms from the imperial center of the USA. So, if Iran, if the war in Iran and Gaza, cannot be stopped by such external means, and that includes the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice, all their proclamations have amounted to nothing. There's supposed to be advisory opinions, sent to the United Nations organization, and the General Assembly is supposed to pick them up and impose sanctions on the state, but they haven't done so. I mean, they could. In fact, that's what the Palestinian delegation announced at the Security Council, that they're going to go to the General Assembly, to ask for either sanctions or suspension of the Zionist state of Israel. But it hasn't happened. And now, Netanyahu has raised the stakes, like big poker game for him, because he's got the cards, so he wants to play them, because he's nothing to lose, because it's the end game now. Okay, so if the external means, including the Gaza flotilla, even if, they do send, 145 small boats, to Gaza, they're all going to be stopped. So, I mean, it's good, in terms of, exposing, the nature of the siege on Gaza, even by the sea. Nonetheless, it's not going to stop the genocide in Gaza. So, what is available to stop the war on Gaza and on Iran? The only last, option, and the most important option, I consider, is addressing the popular consciousness of the Jewish Israelis and of the Jewish diaspora, which can bring pressure to bear upon the Jewish Israelis and upon the, the Zionist dictatorship, that imposes itself on the Jewish communities throughout, the world. Okay. how to address the Jewish popular consciousness in order to turn them against Zionism. That is the question, because that is a determining factor in defeating Zionism from within, because from without, it hasn't worked. I mean, it will work eventually, but how many, martyrs do we want? If we want to end the war, if we want a ceasefire, if we want to have a reconciliation between the two nations of the Palestinians and the Jewish-Israeli Hebrew nation, to bring about some kind of a reconciliation so that neither one nor the other has to eliminate the other in order to have peace, well, there is a way, the Jewish Bundesway, with the concept of national cultural autonomy. Now, the approach taken so that, each nation can live in reciprocity and in mutual coexistence in the same territory. You don't need a state. You just need a federation in which each nation governs itself. And then that would allow for the return of the Palestinian refugees. And that is precisely the problem with the one-state group position, which is proposing an international Jewish anti-Zionist Congress in Vienna this month. And the problem with the one-state proposal is that it is not a solution, just as the two-state proposal is not a solution in and of itself. The problem with the one-state proposal and why it is not a solution is because how is such a formation going to decide on the right of return of the Palestinian refugees? How are the Palestinian refugees going to get back into this one state when, decision-making is supposed to be divided, on an equal basis, 50-50? Where do you get a majority, for the right of return? Because once you have a right of return, then the Hebrew nation nationals do not have, 50% anymore, right? So they're going to be opposed to the right of return of the Palestinians. So how is it going to get implemented? It doesn't. One state group fails on the question of the right of return of the Palestinian refugees, and therefore it is not a solution. Now, the argument then that is used by the general Palestine Solidarity Movement, and perhaps not by the Jewish American opposition groups, but they haven't taken this into consideration seriously. And that is the nature of the Jewish identity. Is it Zionist or is it not? Does Jewish identity equal Zionism as the Zionists claim, or does it not equal Jewish identity? Historically, we know there are many political tendencies, which comprise Jewish identity. But nowadays, the Zionists claim that they are the only possible way to express your Jewishness is through your support for the state of Israel. Okay. Is this true? No. Why? Because, one, the majority of the Jewish people don't even want to live there. Two, the Jewish people, and at the same time, Jewish people know that the Jewish people nation, as we call ourselves, as we know ourselves to be, we are not only a religion, but a culture that includes the religion, but a culture that includes a political identity, which is national in character, even though for 2,000 years this national identity had nothing to do with the state. So we don't have a statist concept of national identity until it was introduced and presented to the Jewish people by the Christian evangelical theological political culture, which called for the removal of the Jewish people from their Christian nation states to a Zionist state in Palestine in place of the Palestinians. So we have to address that. The question is, how do the Jewish people nation survive? Because we are presented with a Holocaust. The Holocaust changes everything. Before that, Marxism could say that the Jewish people can find their liberation in social society, and that Jewish people should give up their Jewishness in order to become, good proletarian. Because being Jewish means that you are not a proletarian for some reason, even though my entire family was proletarian in Poland. Like the stereotype made of the Jewish people is a consequence of the phenomena in Germany when Marx was writing his Jewish question, and the Jewish working class had already moved to Poland on the invitation of the king there, who wanted labor, and the a Jewish middle class was left in Germany, which didn't need to go to Poland to get a job, right? So, the idea that Jewish people are just, some kind of, privileged middle class and therefore not an oppressed nation is the problem, because one, it is not true, and two, it treats the Jewish people not as an oppressed nation, which we are, as evidenced by the Holocaust. And finally, even someone like Trotsky, who was Jewish by origin, as they put it, but he didn't consider himself to be Jewish. Nonetheless, by 1937, he began to state and write that the Jewish people are an oppressed nation and are expected to remain as a nation as a consequence of their oppression. Because, after 4 years of Nazism, finally struck him, and many Marxists, oh, yes, Jewish people exist and they're being subject to oppression. Congratulations, on waking up, to an oppression. It's supposed to be Marxists, and yet they can't even recognize oppression when it exists. Okay, well, so that's orthodox Marxism, which failed in a number of respects, including the revisionism of the Social Democrats. So how to address the question of undermining Zionist support amongst the Jewish people nation, both inside of the Zionist state and outside in the diaspora. Now, the argument used by a large part of the Palestinian solidarity movement is that Zionism is false. It's a false consciousness because Jewish people are not a nation and therefore don't need a state and should just be content to live in the countries from which they came from, and therefore all the Jewish Israelis should go back to the countries from which they came, like Poland. Well, okay, let's pick away at that argument, here a bit. I applied for my citizenship in Poland, because my parents came from Poland. My mother was from Warsaw, from the Warsaw Ghetto, from which she escaped. And then my father was from the city of Lublin in the south, from which he escaped from the ghetto there. And they both found sanctuary in the USSR at the time when no other country in the world would offer refugee sanctuary for Jewish refugees. The United States, Canada, even refused to allow the landing of a Jewish refugee boat called the SS Saint Louis in 1939. And Jewish refugees were not allowed during the Holocaust and after the Holocaust as well. My parents only got into Canada because they had a sister who was a citizen who sponsored us. Okay. So if, the typical Marxist response of, give it up, just become, like a regular, proletarian and assimilate into the local culture and do your job and make the revolution, where you are. Well, it doesn't work, right? Because the working class is also anti-Semitic and does not allow for the integration of Jewish workers. So Jewish workers, teach their children to find sanctuary by getting education and going into the middle class, where they can have an independent existence, not dependent upon finding a job in an anti-Semitic environment where both the workers and the bosses are anti-Semitic, so, as a result, the Marxist orthodox position is that, Jewish people are a privileged caste and should give up their privileges and become, normal people. Well, that's been tried before and hasn't worked. It hasn't worked in Germany, didn't work in Spain in 1492, didn't work in France on a number of occasions when there were expulsions, and didn't work in England in 1290, 92 as well when the Jewish people were expelled. So what makes you think that the same thing is not going to happen again? Only worse, as in Germany. So, to argue that the Jewish people are not a people nation that is an oppressed people nation, to the Jewish people, that sounds very reactionary. You can't even recognize our oppression. And it is reactionary, even though it's calling itself Marxist. So, and another consequence of such an argument, denying the nationality of the Jewish people and therefore denying the right of national self-determination as a state, and thinking that that solves the problem of Zionism and refutes the whole Zionist, political theory. No, it doesn't. And in fact, what it does do is convince the Jewish people that if they cannot find their recognition and their security as a national entity, in the hands of the Palestinian Solidarity Movement and in the thought of Orthodox Marxism, then they have to resort to the only political tendency that is willing to defend the Jewish people as a people nation. And then they're left with the only thing that they know of, which is the Zionist movement. So such an argument of denying the national identity of the Jewish people, denying the right of national self-determination, in effect pushes the Jewish people to being subject to Zionist party control. So it is a self-defeating argument to argue that the Jewish people nation are not a nation and have no right to national self-determination. The Jewish program for Jewish national liberation from oppression is national cultural autonomy, not separatism and not colonialism. And the Zionists propose separatism and colonialism as a solution to Jewish oppression. And we see it doesn't work because it only transfers oppression to another people, only creates more anti-Semitism as a result of Zionism providing itself as a target, for the accusations of immorality, etc. So it's, like a really situation, a condition, that has degenerated enormously into this Zionist quagmire, which is now becoming internationalized, with a war against Iran as well. Because Zionism is not just a matter of Jewish national liberation. No, it's not really into that, What it is into power politics, geopolitics, in which the Jewish national bourgeoisie has found itself a place in the international configuration. The state protects their interests, stops them from being expelled again and all their wealth, confiscated by some monarch, hither or thither. It's become something much more than that. It's become, this crusader state that operates on behalf of its sponsors, which they are quite happy to do, and extends its reach to those places where the United States itself could not reach because of limitations upon imperialism these days by the Third World Revolution that has achieved its independence and strength to some degree now that is considerable and is able to resist such powers as the United States. But, the Zionist state is willing to endure so much punishment that they have become invulnerable to retaliation on a military basis. So there has to be a political struggle which undermines the Zionist state with an internal Jewish revolution against Zionism. And the program I've just enunciated, the means I've stated previously, which was the Jewish Bund, and the Jewish Bund must be reconstructed together with all of the new movements which have been formed, which have sprung up in opposition to Zionism for the reason of its fascist genocidal war on the Palestinians, not only in Gaza, but the West Bank as well now. And they must adopt a program for Jewish national cultural autonomy and fight anti-Semitism more so than Zionism does, and all of its accolades and the whites and all of its centers and such. It has to demonstrate that it can fight anti-Semitism more effectively than the Zionists can. And in fact, the Zionists, are promoting the development of anti-Semitism. And in order to protect the Jewish people, one must rebuild the Jewish Bund. These are the lessons, that have to be taken up. They have not been taken up yet. There is too slow a movement, to recognize the significance of the Jewish Bund and its program. But nonetheless, it is advancing. Even Tony Greenstein in England, who is a prominent anti-Zionist, both in the Palestine Solidarity Campaign and in the Palestine Action Movement, there against war production, well, he's recognized, that there are elements of the Palestinian Solidarity Movement who have no idea that they are damaging the Palestinian Solidarity Movement with their anti-Jewish rhetoric, in effect, in which, they use terms such as Jewish supremacy when it is not Jewish supremacy. This is Zionist, Judeo-Christian supremacy that is being implemented. Jewish supremacy, is not a definition of Zionism, because if it is, then Zionism is representing the Jewish people, which doesn't. Zionism is just one tendency amongst Jewish people and doesn't even have the active support of the majority of the Jewish people, a majority of whom, more than 55% actually, do not even live in that state and don't have a vote. I don't know why, people think that, Jewish people everywhere, control the government of the state of Israel and that it speaks in the name of the Jewish people as it claims to do. No way, just think about it, if we don't have a vote and we're the majority, where does it get the mandate, to declare itself, the Netanyahu speaking at the United Nations on behalf of the Jewish people? Really? No way. No way, no how. That's what I have to say. But I don't think the Palestinian Solidarity Movement is going to listen to me. So I have to go to Palestine. There, when I speak with Palestinians, they understand me much more than the Palestinian Solidarity Movement here. Palestinian Youth Movement, is lost in its sectarianism. They think that the Jewish people are an enemy. And others, refer to Jewish people as an evil. Like this is getting back, to Christian anti-Semitism, like a Catholic anti-Semitism, like in which the Jewish people are supposed to be an evil people who killed the Savior, the Messiah. Well, it's not true. No, so, this degeneracy, of the treatment of Jewish people and the lack of analysis, sectarianism, is what I would point to on behalf of the proponents, the talking points of the Palestinian Solidarity Movement. I wouldn't call it anti-Semitism per se. It's not even Judeophobia, which are other phenomena, but it's certainly sectarianism and may be anti-Semitism and does indeed promote anti-Semitism. So I call upon the Palestinian Solidarity Movement to stop this rhetoric that doesn't recognize that the Jewish people are a people that have been oppressed people and have been misled by the Zionist movement, and that is the target of the opposition. Not the Jewish people per se, and not the Jewish identity. It is not Jewish supremacism, even though that's a term used by many of the Israeli opposition, which, has been raised in a weird way, which, like words don't mean what they mean anymore. And it is used by even some of the Jewish oppositionists. But that is going to be changed, as it has changed, in England already. So that's pretty well the package, that I wanted to present today. And then we can refer to some of the ongoing sort of, developments that are astounding and new, and that I put up on my Facebook page, and I can share them here with you. But I was wondering if, Steve, you would find my analysis, to be suitable, or should we be more optimistic than I am usually in my pessimistic mode?
No, I sent you a chat that unfortunately I'm going to have to leave the broadcast right now. The demonstration is starting soon, so people want me to get there. We have a chance to talk tomorrow and continue the conversation.
Okay, very good. Yes, I have a demonstration as well to go to, as I mentioned, at the U.S. Congress. Yeah. So, but it's good, to get all of this out, before we go to action.
I agree.
Talk and action, together, works. Talk alone doesn't. Yeah.
Right.
Very good. Okay, great. Okay, bye for now.
And one more thing, I just want to ask all our viewers to please like and share. And remember that we are a program that's done by activists to promote the right kind of activism around the world. This isn't just a news program. We make analysis because we're engaged in the fights to make a better world possible.
Yes, because discussion of the development of theory provides a way to carry out action with an objective in which the action is going to conclude with liberation and not just action for the sake of action.
Exactly.
We know where we're going. We know what we're doing.
Okay.
Okay, I'll speak to you tomorrow then. We'll continue the
Thank you.
discussion after the demonstrations. We can talk about them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I would like to go to my Facebook page to show some of the importance of, no. Not that one. Let's see now. I have to find my Facebook here. Oh yeah. It's not that either. Where are you? Okay, let's start here. I can introduce you. Oh. Okay. Let's see, here we are. Now, this is an interview with Scott Ritter, who evaluates the current military exchanges between the Zionist state and Iran to be unfortunately favorable to the Zionist state, and doesn't consider that Iran is carrying out any qualitatively similar sort of effect upon the Zionist state as the F-35 bombardment of Iran is carrying out. Now, Ibrahim Traoré makes a powerful international call for liberation and speaks on behalf of the third world as a whole and the ripoff of Africa, in terms of its resources, and takes on capitalism, basically, as the problematic, to be resolved with the independence of Africa, and Africa to become a world power as a continentally unified Pan-Africanist Congress. And he is forming it. And the speech is, with excellent English, presented here. Russian acrobatics. Putin is getting involved. The war in the Ukraine is coming to an end now because the territories, the Russian-speaking territories, are practically all liberated. So Russia is going to be free of its restraints, in the Ukraine with the end of that war, and they can implicate themselves in other sort of regions like Gaza and Iran. Yeah, Russia and Algeria are warning the U.S. and Israel. And China is beginning involved there as well. China sent its surveillance naval crafts into the Mediterranean off the coast of Gaza. Blumenthal is talking about, Trump's contemplation over whether or not he's going to join the war against Iran. Like at the same time that he's proposing negotiations with Iran. So he doesn't, he could, sort of, really sort of, make Trump or die Trump look ridiculous, for his amateurish incompetence, but he doesn't. And here's Peter Jackson's song on Gaza. And there's the Chinese intelligence boat coming into the fray in the Mediterranean. Yeah. And this is the Iranian potential. Now, the thing is, Iran has months of missiles prepared, and the Zionist state is running out of missiles. So that's a factor to consider. But to conclude today's broadcast, I'd like to give you this. Palestine song here.
See the flames of the days of old, just a century ago. When stories of peace were told of how Galilee ran through the Jordan River. What remains of cold tales of war, of the death and dying, bombshells are flying, bodies multiplying. See the children crying, what are they fighting for? I will pray for you. Palestine, oh, Palestine, I will carry you. Palestine, for you. Palestine, I believe in you. Oh, Palestine, I will die for you. I will pray for you. Palestine, oh Palestine, I will carry you. Palestine, Palestine, Palestine, Palestine, come deep in my heart. I'll always love you. Love you. Palestine, don't cry, I'll pray for you. Oh, Palestine, oh Palestine, oh Palestine, that's a place for you. Oh, Palestine, and I believe in you. Oh, Palestine, I will die for you. I will pray for you. Palestine, I will carry you. Palestine, God's a place for you. Palestine, and I believe in you. Oh, Palestine, I will die for you. I will pray for you. Oh, Palestine, oh, Palestine, oh, Palestine, I will carry you. Oh, Palestine, oh, Palestine, oh, Palestine, oh, Palestine, oh.
Okay.
Oh, Palestine, gotta live, and you, oh, Palestine.
Thanking you, Michael, there. Okay. Okay, that's it. That's all. Until tomorrow then, when we come back from the demonstrations, I'll report on that. Very good. And we need to share this video so that we can get the discussion happening on a broad scale. The broader the discussion, the better the result, right?
All right, then. Yeah, that's a lot to absorb, I guess, for many of you. You know, one thing that I should explain. So Jason Unruh briefly had, when the Maoist Rebel News was a network, when it was briefly a network for a couple of years, all although you didn't get to see him much, Jason Unruh had a sidekick by the name of Maxwell Glover. This was an idea that me and Luke Dublin had, and it was one of the best ideas we had, but unfortunately it fell apart for reasons I won't get into right now because I don't want to drive into any drama. But I'd like to give Maxwell Glover a shout-out. See, Maxwell Glover is a real atheist. He's what an atheist is supposed to be. Now, yes, some atheists stay Jewish while being atheists, and some atheists stay Christian while being atheist. It happens, because religiosity is a matter of orientation, and being an atheist wouldn't change that. But for Maxwell Glover, he is an irreligious atheist. He doesn't have any orientation of such. There is no religiosity to him. He doesn't believe in atheism, because there is no ism for it. Now, he does have a different language than what I have, and so he'll say my atheism. What you need to know is whenever he says my atheism, he's not talking about atheism. He's talking about his own atheist consciousness as a sort of scientific view. It's why he's such a good communist. And we hope to see him back in the work of the Convergence. Both me and him had been set up by some motherfucker called Red Wasp, and I do hope that, Glover, you understand that I am sorry and that I have removed all that nasty crap that we were set up to do that we should not have done. And the dialogue with Dr. Weisfeld is improving, by the way. There was a lot of misunderstandings that occurred. And I know that AB Man would love to talk to you. You two should keep doing dialogues and you should do podcasts. And I hope you hear me, AB. You really need to do podcasts with Maxwell Glover. All right. I'm going to give some afterthought to what was said before. All right, so this Hebrew people, which they call the Israelis, who have not yet become a nation. See, there's a difference between how Dr. Weisfeld neglects nuance and I make sure to keep the nuance. This Hebrew people is not a nation. They are a nation becoming. And they are not a Jewish people. They are not a Jewish people. They are predominantly Jewish. Many of them are Jewish, but many of them have completely left Judaism, you know, for more than one generation. The Hebrew people are not Jewish. The majority of them are Jewish, but they themselves cannot be called a Jewish people at all. They are a post-Jewish culture born out of settler colonialism. Okay. The Hebrews don't have a right to call themselves Israeli. They are not even a Jewish people. Either the Hebrews are Jewish, or diaspora Judea is Jewish. And diaspora Judea is what's Jewish, not the Hebrews. Some of the Hebrews are Jewish. And, you know, it could be, and even though I said most of them are, it could be disputed, because you actually can look at the different demographics to say most of them are really not Jewish. But they were almost all of them post-Jewish. Post-Jewish. What a sad genocidal result. It is also good that the majority of them cease being Jewish and convert to other religions, because the truth is diaspora Judea will survive, and if that means we have to kick the Judaism out of them until they're not Jewish, we'll do that, because they don't want to be Jewish, most of them. You have B'nai Baruch, which they are Jewish over there, but they're also cowards. It's not like the Jewish Palestinians of Meir Sharim, which are brave. B'nai Baruch are such freaking cowards. To be Jewish, you are either born from a Jewish mother, or you are someone who has converted to Orthodox Judaism, such as my wife and two kids. They converted to Orthodox Judaism years ago, and they recently had a confirmation from the rabbi, and it's sealed. That is what makes people Jewish. Like, say that you're Jewish, a Jewish man, and you have a child from a non-Jewish woman, that child won't be Jewish. That child might have Jewishness, though, but having Jewishness doesn't make you Jewish. Having Jewishness just means you're related to the Jewish people. If you convert to a different religion, you are what's called Jewish by default. A good example of this would be Mark Foster. Mark Foster is Jewish by default, but he left the Jewish nation. Now, for Gentiles, Gentile meaning somebody who's not Jewish, Gentiles with Jewishness, and those who are Jewish by default, if they wish to be treated as if they're completely Jewish, the only place this can be done is the Bund. But the Bund cannot make anyone Jewish. That is the duty of the rabbinate. That is how it's always been, and any attempt to change that is colonial. But at the same time, there's another colonial problem. To deny those who are Jewish by default as being proper ambassadors for the Jewish people is colonial. And to deny the Gentiles with Jewishness is colonial. The reason why, and this is really fucking sad, the reason why so many Gentiles with Jewishness are disregarded is because there's a fear that they may want to convert to Judaism. And I say, bring it, please convert to Judaism. Why be such an incomplete person is what I ask. Because you'll find that even while you're happy within the Bund, if you're trying to become Jewish, the Bund will not suffice. Now, it will suffice probably for people who are, like Mark Foster, who are Jewish by default, because they don't care so much to be Jewish. They just know that they're still somehow connected. And they wish an outlet to express that. That's why the Bund has been so healthy for somebody like Mark Foster. But yeah, if you are Jewish by default, you have left the nation. But if you are in the Bund, that will be your connection to us. If you are a Gentile with Jewishness, the only way you're going to feel any connection will be through the Bund. And either that will be enough for you, or you're going to want to convert to Judaism. And you can only convert through Orthodox Judaism. You see, Reform Judaism denies the national identity, and it's also too easily co-opted by either Zionism or Americanism. And the same is true with Reform Judaism. Sorry, it's not just with Reform Judaism. This applies to Conservative Judaism and Reconstructionist Judaism. Now, all three of these non-Orthodox versions of Judaism are Judaism, and those that adhere to them typically tend to be Jewish themselves. But they do not have the Mizora, which gives them the right to make anybody Jewish. They don't. And I can talk more about that in the future. So conversion to Reform Judaism, Conservative Judaism, or Reconstructionist Judaism can never be authentic, ever. I mean, the irony is, if the State of Israel wanted to get more numbers, they would acknowledge those kinds of conversions. But why do they only acknowledge the Orthodox conversions? Because they know it's Jewish. Their whole point is to change and to transform the Jewish people into somebody we're not. Remember, the Hebrew word for Palestine is not Eretz Yisrael. It's Kodesh HaEretz. Now, Kodesh HaEretz is actually a medieval term, because the actual title for Holy Land in Hebrew is actually HaEretz HaKodesha. Or if you wanted to say it in the more Mizrahi accent, it would be HaEretz HaKudesha. It's harder for me to pronounce. You see, I'm so Americanized, you know, like it can be difficult. But I'm relearning how to say a lot of these things. And as of today, upon this recording, I have started going back to yeshiva class. I do this for both Judaism and for Bundism. Remember, Zionism is not political Judaism. Bundism is political Judaism. And just as the Black Panther Party needed an outlet to express their liberation because the communists were too white and too bigoted and not really proletarian in essence, this is the same problem that the Jewish people have. The Jewish people are not just a people nation, but we are also a national caste that is consistently scapegoated. You know, when you look through history, there weren't Jewish bankers even. There were Jewish accountants that worked for those bankers because those bankers were so fucking stupid they had to go to smart people. Because the truth is, like, I'll confirm one thing for you. While there's so many lies about the Talmud, there is a reference to non-Jews being two-legged animals, but the context is to the Roman people. And the only people that are the Roman people today are the Americans. So it's not that I'm saying that Americans are two-legged animals. I'm saying that Americans are the new Romans, and that Romans are two-legged animals. So actually, yeah, I am saying that about Americans. Huh, funny. That was so liberating to say. Almost every American is a megalomaniac at heart. The institutions of Reform Judaism, Conservative Judaism, and Reconstructionist Judaism remain under Zionist control. Not to mention these groups only exist because of the tyrannical secular pressures to force Jew to become less Jew, or Jewish to become less Jewish. For instance, you had that reactionary assimilationist line in Germany that went German on the streets, Jewish in the home. What a bunch of fucking liberal self-hate. You know, that word liberal really does deserve to be compared to the word degeneracy. If someone was born of a Jewish mother yet converts to another religion, this person has in effect left the Jewish nation behind. This person is only Jewish by default. This also means anyone Jewish by default attempting to speak for the Jews is engaging in colonial cultural appropriation. The Hebrew culture, which might be a nation becoming, is a Gentile people which has a significant number of Jewry from within. A significant number of Jews within. And by the way, it isn't really appropriate to say Jew or Jews. It would be better to say Jewish instead of Jew. It would be better to say Jewry or Jewish people than to say Jews. But being that I am so Americanized, it's hard for me to stop saying Jew or Jews. And yes, the English language is by design an anti-Semitic language. You will notice that the these and thous from the Shakespearean English and the King James Bible English, that's not Old English, that's not Middle English, that is actually early modern English, which is artificial. Because if you listen to Old English and Middle English, it sounds much more Germanic, because it was. You see, England had an insecurity problem because the French were of such high culture they wished to compete. No bullshit. National cultural autonomy is correct, and it was never debunked by Vladimir Lenin or Joseph Stalin. Bundism and the national question by Uriah Dia proves this, which is also why Stone's Soviet worked so hard to create strife between myself and Dr. Abraham Weisfeld. Neither Lenin or Stalin credited national cultural autonomy to the Jewish Labor Bund, even though it was the Jewish Labor Bund who first theorized national cultural autonomy. The Social Democrats distorted its meaning, and Lenin and Stalin never even confronted this fact. That they never even confronted how the Jewish Labor Bund explained national cultural autonomy, debunking instead the social democratic co-opted version of national cultural autonomy. Very dishonest. Now, if you think that Lenin and Stalin were some sort of infallible saints, then that really should explain to you why revolution is not coming for you. These people were great for what they did. I have consistently defended, by the way, Joseph Stalin to Dr. Weisfeld and won in those shout matches each fucking time with facts, because yes, it is true, AB tends to be guided through emotionalism, but he doesn't realize he's doing it. Like I said before, you don't understand Holocaust PTSD, which I also have. It just so happens that the persecution that Dr. Weisfeld went under is far worse than anything I ever experienced. Now, yes, I lost friends and they were murdered, but I'm like, throughout growing up and all kinds of things, Dr. Weisfeld had it way worse. Dr. Weisfeld, as a kid, was asked if he could take off his hat so they could see the horns under his hat. Imagine having to deal with that in school while the teacher's laughing and cheering on the kid that's doing it. That's the kind of experiences he had. Of course, the majority of your communists are going to say, no, he didn't experience that because Jews are not persecuted. Such is the communist way of Karl Marx. Jewish supremacy is not the same thing as Zionism. Jewish supremacy is when Jews attempt to force non-Jews to become Jewish. Jewish supremacy was overturned by the rabbis involved in the writings of the Talmud and the Mishnah Rabbah. Now, facts about Michael Jackson's song, Palestine Don't Cry. This is very important. The song that you heard was an AI. It wasn't actually Michael Jackson, but the song was written by Michael Jackson. Nobody knows if there was ever really a recording of the song. It's just that the lyrics are known. And literally 2 months after he had wrote this song, he was accused of child molestation. A charge that not only was never proven, but there keeps getting proof more and more that this didn't happen, that he never touched any children. If you respect the Mossad and their efforts to work with the CIA to accuse anybody who disagrees with the state of Israel of being a child molester, a murderer, you know, all these different degeneracies, then that says a lot about you, doesn't it? The state of Israel has no right to exist. It's Amalek. While the archaic term in Hebrew is Ha'eretz HaKodesha, please understand that's a title shift. The actual name of Palestine in Hebrew is Kodesh HaEretz, which, yes, is a medieval term. There are a lot of lost medieval terms that were in constant use and should still be in constant use because they're part of our true vocabulary. But one of the things people don't realize is that the state of Israel went after Sephardim and Mizrahim. After the Holocaust, while my family suffered from the Holocaust, because yes, certain Sephardim did, while the majority of the Holocaust victims were Ashkenazim, a certain good deal of us were also Sephardim. But Sephardim continued to get attacked after the Holocaust by the state of Israel, by kidnapping the children and assimilating them in and doing experiments on them, and doing the same to the Mizrahim people. However, the war on the Sephardim was different. You see, you'll notice I never list the new Sephardim among the new tribes, because when you look at the Sephardim, we're not Benjaminites at heart. We're not Judites or Levites. Ultimately, what we are is we are the keepers of Judea. We are the keepers of the actual national way of the Jews. So Rambam, the major codifier, what was he? He was Sephardi. Apparently, Shimon Bar Yochai wrote the Zohar according to the tradition, but according to the scientific evidence, it was Moses de Leon. But who was Moses de Leon? A Sephardi. There's also Ramban Nachmanides, who won an argument against Christians and proved Judaism to be stable and not fraudulent. The irony is he did this argument against Pablo Christianity, which was a Jewish convert to Christianity, and he completely won the debate. Because you'll notice that a lot of Jews who convert to Judaism for opportunistic reasons will say, oh, Judaism is evil, it's this or that. But they don't want to argue somebody who stays in the nation, because we always kick your ass. Sephardim, we define what's Jewish. We are the only Jewish group that actually does. Ashkenazim tend to be intellectually dishonest about these things. Now, the funny thing, though, is nobody's more defensive and protective of the Ashkenazim than us Sephardim. The Mizrahim are very bitter towards the Ashkenazim. The Aframim are also very bitter towards the Ashkenazim. The Aframim, by the way, Afram is a reference to the West African Jewish population. By the way, there's more I could say about that, but like, I should really send this off to Jason. I'll be back. Don't worry.
Syria was the buffer zone, and it's best to learn about the cultural differences within Syria before pretending you understand anything about that country. The counter-revolution in Syria was allowed for the ongoing harassment towards Iran to continue until finally Israel hit Iran. I'm now going to show you a video which came out on December 11th, 2024.
My name is Richard Medhurst. I'm a British journalist. I was born and baptized in Syria. So let me give you my perspective on what's happening in Syria, both as a Christian and a journalist who cares deeply about the future of the country. For the last days, the media have been showing images of people celebrating and jubilating and saying the country is finally free and everything is fine and dandy. But this couldn't be further from the truth. The media have been lying about Syria for 13 years. And many Syrians will come to find that they have been duped. This was not a revolution, but a regime change operation. Syria was the last anti-Zionist Arab state in the region. It was the last one that supported the Palestinian cause. And they've been trying to destroy it for decades. In 2011, dozens of foreign countries and groups conspired to overthrow the government. Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UK, France, Germany, the US, the EU. Many jihadists came in from Chechnya, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan. You've got fighters now in from Ukraine, Turkey, Libya, Uyghurs from China. Many of them are not Syrian. The CIA spent over $1 billion trying to overthrow the president. So that's their most expensive operation in history, right? They brought all those weapons in from Libya after they did another regime change operation there. This was the largest propaganda campaign in modern history. MI6 were funding the white helmets and other cutouts. They lied about chemical weapons, just like they lied about them in Iraq, to justify bombing and sanctioning Syria and crippling its economy. Syria is not only occupied by Israel, but by 2 NATO armies, by Turkey, by the United States. And all these rebels got their training and their gear from those actors. You've got a photo of Jolani, who's just casually standing there, watching Damascus as it's being bombed by Israel, doing nothing. And what is he wearing? He's wearing a t-shirt, a shirt from Emerson Gear. So that's either Israel or Turkey that gave it to him. And Turkey was giving these terrorists safe haven in Idlib for years. Syria cannot be removed from the geopolitical context of the Levant. You can't talk about Syria like it's some remote island where things happen in a vacuum. Syria was the piece that connected Iran and Iraq to Lebanon and Palestine. The timing of this offensive in the last few days wasn't a coincidence. It happened right after there was a ceasefire in Lebanon. So as they destroyed Gaza, as they destroyed Lebanon, the Israelis then moved on to destroy Syria. And Turkey, which again is a co-conspirator in all this, Erdogan is admitting that he is behind the offensive. He said it on camera.
Tabii İdlib, Hama ve Humus hedef tabii Şam.
Erdogan is supporting Israel. He is NATO. He's Muslim Brotherhood. So when you have Erdogan admitting this and then Netanyahu doing a victory lap on Syrian soil on the occupied Golan Heights, I mean, what am I supposed to say?
המשטר הזה נפל, זוהי תוצאה ישירה של המכות שהנחתנו על איראן ועל חיזבאללה.
The day that Syria fell, Palestine also fell. These jihadists are an extension of NATO, okay? They've got NATO training, NATO weapons. And have you noticed that they never attack Israel, ever? Erdogan and Al-Qaeda, all they do is talk about the Ummah, and yet they won't lift a finger for Palestine? These jihadists are in Damascus under the Israeli bombs, and they still won't fire a shot at Israel. They won't even talk about the bombings. These rebels have conspired to leave Syria defenseless. Instead of fighting Israel, they're busy changing flags and eating ice cream and giving speeches. That's how much they care about Syria. And make no mistake, because these are extremists, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is a rebrand of Jabhat al-Nusra, which is a rebrand of Al-Qaeda. Jolani, who now they're trying to portray as some kind of statesman and a moderate, was the head of Al-Qaeda's branch in Syria. He was a deputy of al-Baghdadi in ISIS. The US even put a $10 million bounty on this guy's head. He is a head chopper. He is a terrorist. You think Al-Qaeda is going to give Syrians freedom of speech and protect minorities and make people equal? They're already carrying out public executions, beatings. This is vigilantism. And they said they'd give Syrian soldiers amnesty and then lied about it. And they filmed their own executions. How is Al-Qaeda being in charge of Syria better than the previous regime? The people cheering this on are mental. You've taken away a bad car and then given people a bicycle instead and called it a set of wheels. I mean, this is a downgrade, to put it mildly, in every way. Syria was secular. Syria was safe for all religions and ethnic groups. Syria, remember, is a Christian country first. Christianity was born in Syria. Syria is just as much Christian as it is Muslim. But now Christians and other minorities are under threat. The first photo that they post of this new cabinet and this new prime minister, this is a state institution, right? They've got an Islamic extremist flag right next to the Syrian flag, the new Syrian flag. What kind of message is that supposed to send to Syrian Christians who make up 10% of the population and other minorities? It tells them, basically, screw you. You're excluded. That's what it means. And we see the extremism on the streets. We see the ISIS trucks driving through Christian neighborhoods in downtown Damascus, firing Kalashnikovs into the air and terrorizing people. A Christian journalist who was stopped in a Christian neighborhood and questioned about her religion.
أجبرني أن أقول هذا الشيء. قال طلع فيه إنه أنت مسيحية علوية سنية مسلمية لا إنه شيعية درزية.
I mean, this is unheard of in Syria. You've got priests that are hiding their crosses when they take photos with these new leaders. And then we're supposed to look at that and believe that this is inclusive. This climate of fear did not exist a week ago. All right. Syria is going backwards. Syria was self-sufficient in oil, gas, wheat, cotton, grain. Syria had no foreign debt. Its central bank, its monetary policy were independent. They were not controlled by the West. Syria had free healthcare, free education, social welfare programs, social safety nets, improved literacy rate, improved infrastructure. I saw all of that with my own eyes. And now what is happening? It has regressed. But as soon as this new regime in Damascus announced that Syria will be a free market economy, meaning come in, bring your foreign direct investment so you can control our monetary policy and our politics, what happens? The United States removes Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, meaning Al-Qaeda, from the terrorist list. Isn't that amazing? The Western Israel have been dying to move on Syria's gas, and that's exactly what they're going to do, just like they're going to steal Gaza's and Lebanon's gas, so they can replace the Iranian and Russian gas, which they sanctioned. In 1 or 2 years, Syrians will be begging for the old days, just like Iraqis and Libyans do right now, when they remember what their countries were turned into by NATO. And look at the level of whitewashing, right? Do you hear any of the Western media talking about persecution of minorities and how Christians are being treated? Instead, they're rehabilitating this disgusting head chopper, Jolani. They're glorifying Al-Qaeda in the media, but I'm the one who gets arrested for terrorism, right? I'm the one who's under investigation, even though they're breaking the law.
But I think Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, the leader, has made great efforts over the last 10 years to distance himself from those terrorist groups. And certainly the actions we've seen of Tahrir al-Sham over the last 2 weeks has been those of a liberation movement, not of a terrorist organization.
And then they have the nerve to complain about Russia invading Ukraine, but they call Israel's invasion a buffer zone. I mean, the nerve. Don't forget that Israel has a Greater Israel project. You've got IDF troops who openly carry patches of Greater Israel on their uniforms. Smotrich, the finance minister, said on video just a few weeks ago that he wants Greater Israel to extend to Damascus, to swallow up the Syrian capital.
כתוב בחז"ל שעתידה ישראל, עתידה ירושלים להתרחב עד דמשק. רק ירושלים, עד דמשק.
Bezalel Smotrich a une vision maximaliste de la terre promise. Elle inclut les territoires palestiniens, mais aussi des territoires en Jordanie, en Syrie, au Liban, en Irak, en Égypte ou encore en Arabie.
And many who are pro-Palestine are still too dumb to understand that there is an Israeli agenda in Syria. And don't forget, Erdogan had control of Idlib and was harboring all these terrorist groups that he sent on the offensive. Turkey attacked Syria from the north. Turkey's now moving its own troops into Aleppo, and Israel attacked Syria from the south, while the Americans are in the east occupying the oil. And what did Israel do? Israel took control of Mount Hermon, of Jabal el-Sheikh. This is the most strategic place inside of Syria. It's the highest peak. It overlooks Israeli troop positions, and they took it without a fight. They've taken an area of land now in the last 48 hours that's several times the size of Gaza. They have destroyed Syria's military infrastructure, missiles, tanks, planes, ships, you name it, research laboratories. This is Israel's largest air offensive in history. Over 400 airstrikes. Not a word from these so-called rebels who claim to be representing the interests of Syrians. Israeli troops are 19 kilometers from Damascus. And the irony is the Israelis pretend that, oh, they don't want the weapons to fall into the hands of jihadists. You're the ones who gave the jihadists weapons in the first place. Netanyahu was in hospital, in an IDF hospital, shaking the hands of these so-called moderate rebels who are Al-Qaeda and doing photo ops with them. They were giving him medical assistance. They were giving them weapons. They were doing everything in their power, acting as an air force for them in order to help them overthrow and topple the government in Syria. And now we've got reports of scientists also being killed and hunted down in Syria, which is exactly what Israel did in Iran. They are crippling Syria's defenses for generations. And any government that is formed now is already going to be neutered, impotent, and illegitimate, and will have no sovereignty. How can you form a government? How can you defend the country when you allowed the enemy to destroy all of the military assets? This is treason. It's frankly treason. And the United States said they'll call the Golan Heights, the occupied Golan Heights, Israeli, as long as Assad is in power.
As long as Assad is in power in Syria, as long as Iran is present,
in Syria, militia groups backed by Iran, the Assad regime itself. All of these pose a significant security threat to Israel, and as a practical matter, the control of the Golan in that situation, I think, remains of real importance to Israel's security.
Well, guess what? Bashar al-Assad is gone. And yet they haven't changed their position. Joe Biden has kept Donald Trump's position of stealing land from Syria. The United States put Caesar Act sanctions on Syria. Bashar al-Assad is gone. Have they lifted the sanctions? No, the sanctions are still there. Is the U.S. Still controlling the wheat? Is it still controlling Syria's oil fields? Yes, it is. Donald Trump admitted it. Joe Biden kept them there, and now Bashar al-Assad is gone, and they still won't move their troops. They're still right there stealing our resources. Isn't it amazing? So in conclusion, Turkey's stealing more land. Turkey is going to attack the Kurds and persecute them, and now has them surrounded. Israel is stealing more land. Israel's destroyed Syria's military and Syria's central role in the Palestinian cause. Al-Jolani and his Al-Qaeda scum are going to sit on the throne, and US corporations and banks will take over Syria's economy, hollow it out, steal its resources, and block the new Silk Road's access to the Mediterranean Sea so they can cripple China and the global south. This has been their plan all along. The same people that are committing a genocide in Gaza have taken over Syria under the banner of a fake revolution. And those who call themselves pro-Palestinian, many of them are too blind to see that by celebrating what is happening in Syria, they're siding with Netanyahu.
So I'm going to say a couple things about this. First of all, Donna Newman had the theory that real permanent revolution was going to pop off in Egypt. I denounce this notion. Because if you know about any of the Arab states, the ones who are constantly hostile to the Palestinian people are the Egyptians. Now, not the Egyptian proletariat and the Egyptian lumpen proletariat. Particularly the Egyptian lumpen proletariat is very pro-Palestinian, both Christian and Muslim. But this is also a place where certain Karaites still exist, and Karaites aren't really Jewish, despite what Rambam said. Rambam took a lot of liberties he shouldn't. And I will defend the sages, but I'm not afraid of critiquing the sages taking too many liberties that they shouldn't have taken. But I will defend them too, because the truth is non-Jews are just threatened by the fact that you can never prove with the Jewish scriptures that Jesus was the Messiah. Never will you prove this. Yeshu lo Yeshu. What a terrible thing he was. May his name be erased from the book of life. Now, as for the Jesus of the Gospels, that's a completely fabrication. Like, it comes from a retroactive look at history trying to justify this guy that they wanted to be the Messiah. The early Christians that fell in love with this gospel story were the Edomites, that's the children of Esau. And this is because they were scarred with Jewish ideas, because while it was a good thing to take over Judea because it was ours, and because the Hellenized Syrians tried to take it away from us, when we beat them back and we restored the temple, and this is why you have Hanukkah, that was a good thing. That's perfectly justified. Those that have a problem with that are just colonial. However, what's sad is that's when we went to the neighbors, Idumea, as I think it was called in Greek, or that's at least the English way to say it, translated from Greek or Latin. Edom, the Edomites, Edom, or Esau being the brother of Jacob. An Abrahamic people that were notorious for ditching Abrahamic values, they felt repressed because they had been forced to convert to Judaism. In fact, at the time of Jesus, King Herod, what was he? This is the guy that actually had them expand the second temple. He was an Edomite whose family had been forced to convert to Judaism. And see, the thing with Edom is they had, over time, accepted a lot of Jewish ideas, but they loved the Greek ideas. So with Jesus from Galilee, from the city of Nazareth, which was known to have a large Greek-speaking population and a lot of Greek ideas flowing, he was very appealing to the Edomites. They had every right to become these Christians. And it's important to understand that. Now, Medhurst claims that Syria is where Christianity started, but that's only half true. It was Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon. So, this is very important to understand. It's actually Syria where permanent revolution will kick off. Now, Dr. Weisfeld's stance, which I will explain to people finally, it's not that, oh, well, this is a great revolution, although he does mistakenly call it a revolution, despite the fact that it's actually a counter-revolution. He also slanders people who point out this fact as if they're Assad apologists, rejecting their nuances. He's been doing this for years. He did it to Uri Adia, a Jewish Syrian, all the time. And then in Manual for Revolution, he later took the correct position, only to later drop the correct position because his wishful thinking picked up, and that's due to the morphine he was on for his knee surgery. To this day, he denies it even to me that that's what was going on, but that's exactly what was going on, because we look at the manual and we're baffled, like, wait, he has the correct position, but once the coup happened, he was all for it. But his actual position is to wait and see what happens. Well, we have waited to see what happens, and everything is getting worse. And ABI will be putting out Hermet Hirsch, and he sources everything. If you deny that, you're just denying reality yet again. Now, Dr. Weisfeld does have a history of telling Syrians to fuck off when they tell him the truth, and he does ignore evidence. That's actually something I've witnessed. Many people have witnessed this when he deals with Syrians. And it's actually causing me a lot of problems in real life. People say that I'm not credible because I'm backing him, not realizing the nuance that just because he has a bad take on Syria doesn't mean he's wrong about everything. I mean, whether you fucking commies want to believe it or not, you're wrong about a lot of things, but I still defend you, even to Dr. Weisfeld, on things I know you're correct about. Especially when it comes to that piece of shit Trotsky. May his name be erased from the book of life. May Braunstein's name be erased from the book of life. May Karl Marx's name be erased from the book of life. May Theodor Herzl's name be erased from the book of life. May America Hana's name be erased from the book of life. May Benjamin Netanyahu's name be erased from the book of life. May Shabbatai Sia's name be erased from the book of life. And may Bar Kokhba's name be erased from the book of life. If you want to know, so people will often refer to Zionism as modern Zionism, but then saying, well, was ancient Zionism any better? No. Ancient Zionism was started by Bar Kokhba, Simeon Bar Kokhba, otherwise known as Bar Koziba. And he was a failure. He was endorsed by one of our great sages known as Rabbi Akiva, and then Rabbi Akiva disassociated when it turned out he was not the Messiah. And to this day, it's one of the big embarrassments we have, because we love Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was so essential for our history, but he did make mistakes. Anyway.
This genocide cannot be stopped by merely condemning it with words. Now that Palestine is seen in the public consciousness as fighting for its liberation, it's time to fully denounce Third World non-violence. The Third World and the Fourth World need to be armed. I live in Canada, so I cannot arm anyone. Canada is the homeland of the cowardly. While it is true that we are much better educated than the Americans, while it is true that we have a less hostile nature, our Canadian civil societies do nothing about the imperialist nation state of Canada. I will for the first time confirm Americans that they already suspected. Canadian nationalism and Canadian patriotism is a comic joke, both within Canada and outside Canada. Conservatives in Canada love the American Confederate battle flag. For them, astroturfing is patriotic and even ultra-nationalist. The Liberals double down on Britishism, reminding us that while the American economy controls the Canadian economy, we are all subjects of the British Crown. Many nationalists within Canada wonder why the population of Canada refuses to shake off Americanism and Britishism. The reason for this is simple. Canada, New Zealand, Australia are just British settler colonial nation states. As time has gone by, it is clear that the nation state has no right itself to exist. Syria would not have suffered through a counter-revolution had Syria been a federated state instead of a nation state. The Cold War failed because it was not a class war. When we really dive into it, when we see how much more correct Mao Zedong was compared to Joseph Stalin. But today, China is not a socialist country in any way, shape, or form. The revisionism of China started with Mao himself when he met with Richard Nixon and refused to meet with Huey P. Newton. The First World reinforces class structures around the world. We make up the type of global bourgeois internal proletarian contradictions neglected by dogmatic Marxists. This is why resistance in the First World matters. Right now, the resistance in the First World is the one which confronts colonialism, and any communist who rejects the protests, which stand in solidarity with Palestine and Iran, expose themselves as counter-revolutionary. The Third World is the global proletariat, and the Fourth World is the global lumpen.
All right. And last but not least, so first, I have mentioned the Jewish Palestinians. They live in the greater metropolitan Jerusalem, right outside the old city of Jerusalem. Because you got to understand, there's the citadel enclave of the old city of Jerusalem, and then outside of that, there's the greater metropolitan Jerusalem. Meir Sharim predates the state of Israel. It was founded in 1880 or 1884, one of the two, I'm not sure. When these Ashkenazi, Haredi, Hasidic people came to Palestine to live, when they came and they asked, can we live here, the Palestinians opened them with open arms. So it was not colonial. It was not colonial. I have a lot of respect for Ahmed of Palestine, but he's being historically dishonest when he says, well, they're a colonial group that I can approve of. They were never colonial. They were immediately embraced by the population. That is a fact. People who say they love Palestine but hate Jewish people cover up the existence of Meir Sharim because of the fact that this discredits the concept of Jewish people being in favor of Zionism. And Zionists cover it up because if more people knew about Meir Sharim, it's very possible the state of Israel could cease to exist. That isn't hyperbole. I'm not going to have any compassion on your ignorance. Your ignorance, you communists are ignorant because you're willfully ignorant, because you want to believe that you little white little are somehow special, but you're not. You're not. You're aristocrats. This first video of the Jewish Palestinians in the neighborhood of Meir Sharim, the Jewish Palestinians, this first one took place on December 21st, 2022.
Ja, opnemen die Fenner, ja, opnemen die Fenner. Und opnemen Fenner, dat die ganze Reis? Ja. Die Fenner, die Fenner. Die Fenner, die Fenner, die Fenner. Die Fenner, die Fenner. Was? Was ist da? Ja, Leider? Ehle, geh mal, guck mal rein für sein. Ja, השוטר? Nee, er gewinnt da בכלל. זה אותו סגרתי מת.
Esta le discussione deve essere di Yevuni.
למה רק זה מעניין אותי? למה רק זה מעניין אותי?
You said moving terrorists! All the Palestinian terrorists! That's why I say, okay, Palestinian! نجل مع الشعرين نجل مع الشعرين نجل مع الشعرين نجل مع الشعرين
توبي Ja, die morgen.
كيف في نويبي؟ ليش على نويبي؟ كيف في نويبي؟ كيف في نويبي؟
ראית מה הוא עשה פה שזה לילד? הוא כזה... וואי, הוא מגיע עם התיק מהחיידר,
היטלר! היטלר!
הלו!
Hey, so that was pretty interesting, huh? So the second one took place on July 9th, 2023.
מה אתה צריך את הנשק אם אתה לא משתמש בו?
Weiß nicht.
Wieder ein Kappel! Wieder ein Kappel!
Er will es sagen.
Einer ist der Kappelutsch!
Nee, brauchst du dein Kappel?
וואי. שיקסר! שלם כבר! שיקסר! מלך הולכת! מלך הולכת!
kommen nicht da rein. וואו! תראה? איפה המזרחניק? Even op die foto. Stay, John Schmidt. Ja. איפה המזרחניק? מחבלים! בסדר. מחבלים ציונים! מזרחניק מחבל! מחבלים ציונים!
Pretty cool, pretty cool. All right, and this final one that we're going to see here, this one took place sometime in November 2023. I'm not sure when it took place, but it took place sometime in November 2023. Yeah, after October 7th.
בכל תמחה את זכר המלך. לא עוצר! לא עוצר! לא עוצר! כולנו פלסטינים! בכל תמחה את זכר המלך. שם יש עבודות, אתה לא הולך עכשיו, אתה עומד פה. יונתן ניסים.
מחבלים! איפה הכניסו נוער? ניקח אתכם! מחבלים! תלכו לעזה! מחבלים! מחבלים!
חייבים להוריד את זה, אין מצב, אין מצב, חייבים להוריד את זה.
רוצים!
Right, that's good. Again, I'm going of the under. Again, I'm first the video. Again, I'm going of the under.
תגיע, כניסה הקרקעית תגיע. אל תפריע, שומע? אני מזהיר אותך פעם ראשונה, אל תפריע, אל תפריע, אל תפריע.
הוא עיתונאי, אל תיגע בו.
שמעת מה אני אומר לך?
רד ממני, מה נפלת עליי?
אל תפריע.
איפה הפרעתי? הוא ביקש שאני אצא.
אל תפריע.
לא? תפסיק להציק לי. אני עם כולם, תפסיק להציק לי. תראה לו תעודת עיתונאי וזהו.
מה עשית? בשעה מפריע! אתה פעם ראשונה אומר לי לעזור. אתה פעם ראשונה אומר לי לעזור. פעם עשירית אמרתי לך! תיכנס לבפנים! פעם ראשונה... אולי מצלם טוב, תתאמן! כמעט!
Nicht auf dem Trepplober. זרוק, זרוק.
לבנה! לבנה סמוכה, תשתקי קצת! עוד פעם!
מחבלים! הייתם בדרום 5 שעות. במאה שערים אתם פה על הדקה. ממשיכים מורשתו של היטלר. נכדים של היטלר.
Whereas part 1 was a warm-up, part 2 here is what sets the standards for the rest of the series. The rest of this series will not be so long as this. And part 3 will have a lot more Jason Unruh in it than Comrade Ned. I know people would like me and Jason to apologize for our anger that seeps through and bleeds through and is very transparent in this video. But neither he nor myself owe any of you fuckers an apology. Jason Unruh is correct to hold up third worldism. If you communists are serious, you too would be third worldists. And I do recognize MLM as real communist. It's just that, even MLM, is stuck in the dogmas. According to the federated MLM cadres, what makes Maoism distinct from Leninism is that Maoism is in flux, whereas Leninism is frozen. Okay, fair enough. But even Maoism is dated. It really is. The communists are supposed to be the scientific socialists, but instead the communists are just Marxists. Nameism, rather than praxisism. How unfortunate. If you communists can't take just a bit of criticism, then what good are you? Some people will jump to conclusions and say, oh, well, Dr. Weisfeld, he's talking about the doctor's plot, which never happened. I have combated Dr. Weisfeld peddling that fascist propaganda about a so-called doctor's plot, which, really, only a small segment of those people were even Jewish, and, that was a more complicated issue than AB likes to render it. However, I aim to be truthful all around. And what he says earlier in this video, what he says to Steve Struggle about the execution of Jewish people forming an anti-fascist committee, it's all true. This doesn't mean Joseph Stalin had it in for the Jewish people, or that Joseph Stalin even promoted fascism or was even for it. It means that the state is questionable. Yes, I find the anarchists utopian as well. But, at least they're not pragmatists. It's the problem with you communists, you're pragmatists. You say you're scientists, but you're really just pragmatists. Pragmatism leads to the death of struggling peoples, all for your sake of wishing that you consumer service class aristocrats really just want to have a bigger paycheck. Long live liberation, long live Palestine, long live Syria, long live Lebanon, long live the Islamic Republic of Iran, long live the Alamut. It's sad. As I look through this video, you can see the gray hairs. I'm going gray, which is just an age thing, but I feel like my 20s and 30s were largely absorbed in so much conflict. Solidarity to Jason Unruh and his efforts for putting out necessary press that you can't find anywhere else.